Too much sleep last night.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. Would everyone please rise for the pledge of allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moment of silence, please. Thank you. First item is to adopt the agenda.
Mr. Chair, let me make sure people are aware there's an item F1, which is a presentation of your annual audit. Mr. Roller has informed me that that is not ready for today, so that will push it off to next month. So it would be appropriate to remove that from the agenda. Also included on the agenda an opportunity for closed sessions regarding performance evaluations that's been on the agenda the last several meetings. It's not clear to me whether the board needs that or not, but I want to be prepared to be there.
At our continued meeting, at our continued meeting, was it Friday the
Tonight.
I'm sorry, see, I'm not going to recall that. I thought that we had a possibility that we would meet with employees.
Yeah, I don't know that there was anything decided, so I wanted to make sure it was on the agenda in case the board wanted to hold that closed meeting.
I guess my question, Mr. Chairman, did you get an opportunity to meet with employees and present them the information that we discussed?
The performance evaluations.
The performance evaluations are the ones that we handed out here that haven't been given to anyone else.
But were they given to the county administrator and county attorney? Did you get a chance to
Yes.
meet with them? Thank you.
Yes. I've got copies I can hand out to the board, so we have all those on record now in the office. Special filing cabinet.
So do we have to decide now if we're going to have a closed session, or can we just approve the agenda minus F1?
You certainly could.
All right, I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda minus F1, and we'll decide later if we're going to have a closed session.
Motion made and second. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carried. Next item.
Before we jump into the minutes for adoption, if I could just take 1 minute of time for Mike and let folks know that are here that we do have a new piece of technology, assisted listening system for those that are hard of hearing. If you have a hearing issue, I'm getting an A-OK from the court for one that's in use right now, please let me know and we can break out a receiver that is connected to our PA system and can transfer that information right to your ear, or if you have the right kind of hearing aid, it can connect to that hearing.
You see Mr. Irwin smiling over there, so he's probably catching every word now.
I didn't take a deposit.
This is a wireless.
It's wireless, right? FM 79.
I wondered whether the contraption was, but I thought I would not was my ignorance so early.
Technically, it's required by law, and we've been doing it all along.
You just put it there today.
Right.
So that brings us to minutes. Minutes for adoption. I do only have one set of minutes included, and that is for the November 9th continued meeting noted to the board outside of the meeting, the November 5th minutes for the long meeting at the high school. They are not ready yet. That's my recommendation, not to approve the continued meeting minutes until you actually approve the meeting minutes. So with that, I'll leave it to the board's discretion.
So I make a motion that we'll table the approval of the minutes.
Doesn't require action.
I would prefer to wait until we got the November 5th minutes.
That's one.
That's a consensus.
Moving right along. Brings us to public comment session.
Public comment, this is the time that anyone wishing to speak has the opportunity. Please raise your hand to be recognized. Once recognized, state your name, the district that you're from, and I'll open the public comment section now. Yes.
It's George Sonnet, Hampton District. Thank you.
Yes, you're good.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon.
So one of the things,
Again, George Sonnet, Hampton District.
one of the things is direct your comments to the board.
Yes. Everyone in the room is aware that over the last several years, there's been a lot of controversy over the litigation that has been filed against the county and various board members, the crux of which is typically centers around, in effect, not being able to follow the rules. And the rules are, it's not that complicated to follow the rules of local government. The rule book is basically Title 2.2 and Title 15.2 of State Code. Again, it's really, I don't think it's that difficult to follow the rules. So what brings me here this afternoon is having looked at the agenda over the weekend, I saw the resolution regarding Deputy County Attorney. And I didn't see it the first time around, but I saw it this time. And I also saw this board's hiring policy, which is dated December 4, 2017. I took a look at that along with this resolution. And I guess the first thing that struck me about the hiring policy is, I don't know Mr. Curry, but it makes me feel sorry for Mr. Curry that this board doesn't trust him enough to make hiring decisions. He's well paid, experienced, but the hiring policy in effect takes away from him the ability to hire director level positions, department level positions, excuse me. So I just don't understand that. I don't understand what the board's afraid of. Drilling down a little further and relating to the resolution, Deputy County Attorney is not one of the positions, as far as I can tell, that's subject to this hiring policy. So why is the county administrator not going through the normal process of advertising this position? It's setting aside the issue of why in the world a county of 7,000 people needs a deputy county attorney. Maybe we'll save that for another day. So, following the rules, okay? I asked this body, this board, to follow the rules. Follow your own hiring policy. The resolution's out of order with respect to the hiring policy. Hopefully this body believes in open competitive hiring, equal opportunity employment, and so on. I mean, this resolution, frankly, strikes me as, it just smacks of patronage. And I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Anyone else care to speak?
Chair, members, I'm Stephen Brooks, and I'm very pleased to say that I'm a constituent of Ms. Smith in the Piedmont District. On behalf of the United Citizens of Rappahannock, of which I'm a board member, I wish to express our continued support for the work of the board to adopt Code of Ethics. And to that end, I have a copy for each member of a petition which is identical to that which we presented to Mr. Frazier and Mr. Welch at the Rules Committee meeting on Friday. And I will give that to Mr. Curry, and thank you very much for your time. And introduce my colleague, Mr. Regnery.
Thank you. I'm Al Regnery from the Hampton District, and I'm the co-chair with Steve of the United Citizens of Rappahannock. As you know, we've been advocating that the board adopt a code of ethics. We hope ultimately would apply to everybody, every employee and every appointed and elected official in the county. Just to say that on Friday I attended a very productive meeting of the Rules Committee. Mr. Frazier, Mr. Welch, and Mr. Curry was there, Mr. Goff, and we discussed various things that one or another saw that was shortcoming of the draft that we had, and I think we corrected all of those, and I believe Mr. Goff is drafting new language, and so I think it's well on the way, and I'd just like to thank you for your participation and your cooperation on Friday, both of you board members, and I think, as I say, a very productive session and the kind of thing that this county needs. So thank you.
Anyone else care to speak? Yes, Steve.
Good afternoon, board. Dave Deacons from Hampton District and property owner in Hawthorne. Now that the bike trail issue, thank God, has been resolved, I'm going to stir the pot up a little bit. If you recall, it took us about a year to get VDOT's approval of 2 signs warning about children, cautioning children in Woodville. I'm here to report that it's a total dismal failure. It's done nothing to slow the traffic down. So what I'd like to do is make a proposal. I have 2 issues to talk about, this one and another unrelated. I'd like to make a proposal that the village of Woodville, Flintville, the villages of Woodville, Flintville, and Sperryville have rumble strips installed. And you don't have to look any further than Northern Virginia to see that these are effective. It doesn't affect the snow plowing, they still manage to sit there. Something has to be done to stop it, to slow the traffic down in these villages. Washington, since it's off the real beaten track path, it's actually off of 211, I don't think that's as much of an issue. I'm sure people will take exception to that. But it's a total failure. All you need to do is stop there and put a lawn chair up and find somebody that's going 35 miles an hour. I defy you to find it. The second issue is I brought up again, I'm bringing this up again, I brought it up in the past. Back in the early 80s when we came in, the zoning administrator prior to Mr. McCarthy held us to the fire about having the majority of our property being 14% or less in slope. And when I drive by and I look at these mountains, I say, again, I describe these as sacred mountains, the noblest mountains in the world. sort of like the last straw is when I'm heading down 622, and I look at Red Oak Mountain, totally black mountain. All of a sudden now, we've got lights that you can see from the satellite. And you head eastbound on 211, and you look at Jenkins Mountain, and you look what's happening there, and you've got a house that looks like a Mississippi steamboat. You can see that thing from 10 counties away. If you insist on not enforcing this thing on an even basis, essentially, that we're all held to the same standard, then change the building code to restrict the lighting, make it downcast time, make it mandatory, whatever. I'm all for property rights. Nobody is more favorable of property rights than myself. But I used this analogy again, I'll use it before, I'll use it again. Look at Mulholland Drive in California, in LA, and 10 years down the road, you're going to see this. And when these people come from the city, if you're scared of a freaking bear, move back to the city. You know, this is the woods. You don't need to have second coming lights. So I'd just like to get an answer as to why that statute or that part of the code is not being enforced at this stage. Because I defy you to tell me that any of those houses are on top of these mountains. The majority of their slope is less than 14%. Thank you.
Anybody wishing to speak?
Page Bunny, and today I'm representing RCCE. I also attended Friday's Rules Committee meeting, and we took a vote, and we would like to endorse the discussions that went on at that meeting, and particularly references to FOIA and FOIA into the code, defining what confidential means, including workplace environment, and most importantly, making sure that the due process is mandatory. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Anyone else here to speak? Declare public comment closed. Anybody have any comment? If not, we'll go to Dr. Gregson about our school.
Good afternoon. Greetings from your friends at Pantherland. I cannot believe we're in December already. I'm looking at SOL testing starting next week for first semester classes. Whew, it goes by quick. I trust you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. Maybe even got to attend the Commit to Be Fit turkey trot that happened that day. It was a 5K event at the high school, even though it was very, very cold. We did have a great turnout. We were thrilled to see so many community members come out even on that freezing Thanksgiving Day. On November 8th, RCHS held its annual Career Day, in which all students grades 7 through 12 met with local experts from various career fields to talk about the future and the pathways leading to the job. Experts were present from fields such as veterinary science, hospitality and tourism, electrical, real estate, data science, nursing, cosmetology, architecture, and more. What is clear after events like this is just how truly blessed we are as a community, because we are a microcosm of expertise in just about every career field you can think of. So that's great for our high school, especially as we're integrating these career standards. Congratulations and best of luck to our RCHS drama troupe, who will be competing in the VHSL state competition tomorrow at Monticello High School in Charlottesville. The competition begins around 4:25, but our troupe is set to perform later in the day around 5:55 p.m. Our fall sports wrapped up last month, culminating in a wonderful fall sports awards ceremony that took place on Monday, November 9th. The following athletes received special recognition during that awards ceremony. For JP Boys Soccer, Jose Canseco Martinez and Scott Woodward. JP Cross Country, Sam Vandry and Nick Claxon. Sarah Dotson and Brianna Covarrubias. Varsity Cross Country, Luke Ellis and Rachel Weghorst. JP Football, Jordan Evans and Caleb Vitko. Varsity Football, Edgar Gonzalez and Michael Reed. JP Cheer, Jordan Woodward, McKenna Terosian. Varsity Cheer, Logan Woodward and Ashley Peeling. JP Volleyball, Abigail Atkins and Haley Taylor. JV volleyball, Carrington Wayland and Savannah Loving. Varsity volleyball, Olivia Atkins and Sarah East. Huge congratulations to RCHS senior Sarah East, who made the VHSL Class 1 Girls 2018 second team All-State volleyball team. Rachel Wedhorse placed 9th in the state at the VHSL cross country meet last month at Great Meadows. In a special signing ceremony on November 26th, RCHS senior Brett Midkiff committed to play baseball at Mount St. Mary's University during the upcoming year. Brett's family, coaches, teammates, and friends proudly looked on as Brett accepted and signed the scholarship at that signing ceremony. And winter sports are underway, so please check out our athletic page for upcoming sporting events. We're very small, but our teams are strong, and we're really performing out there, so that's wonderful. On November 14th through 16th, I was in attendance at the Virginia School Board Association Annual Conference in Williamsburg. 4 of my board members were able to attend one day. This conference is a wonderful opportunity for administrators and the board to receive the up-to-date state training on various topics of great concern, like updates on EEOC labor laws and FOIA, the latest court cases, Title IX, FERPA, all that lovely thing that, you wait to see what the judicial system has decided on certain cases. Then, of course, there are the more fun presentations about educational governance best practice, such as the Commit to Be Fit session that Rappahannock got to present to interested board members and superintendents from across the state at this event. So we're very excited to be part of that. Also, the event was even more special because this year, one VSBA scholarship was given, the VSBA Exhibitor Scholarship, and for the second year in a row, Rappahannock County had a student win that award. This year was senior Macy Montgomery, who won in large part due to her essay outlining how her diagnosis of type 1 diabetes has not held her down, but rather inspired her to pursue a career in health sciences to work toward helping children and others with the disease. As her National Honor Society project, Macy has worked with local health officials to provide gel packs for quick restoration of blood sugar for crashing type 1 diabetic students in the classroom. So we're so proud of her, and that's the second year in a row, and this year she was the only one in the state to receive the award. So Rappahannock students are performing. The elementary band will be performing their winter concert on December 12th at 6:30 at the elementary school auditorium, and that will be followed by the RCHS Panther Band winter concert the following evening on December 13th at 6 p.m. in the high school. So if you were at the Veterans Day Assembly, then you know how wonderful our band truly is, and this year, especially with over 50% being 8th grade students, so I couldn't believe the sound. They're so talented. You can just imagine what they'll sound like in just a few more years. This week, in collaboration with the PTO, students have the opportunity to celebrate Computer Science Education Week at the Christmas and Coding event at elementary school. Students will be engaged with teachers in coding puzzles developed through the Hour of Code initiative. It's now mandatory for schools to implement computer science standards of learning into the curriculum in grades K through 12. And this event is one piece to that puzzle and a kickoff to what we're doing, and this will be discussed at our upcoming school board meeting next week, how we're integrating those standards. Our first round of SOL testing begins Monday, December 10th, next Monday. So no snow can be in the forecast because we have limited time to get ready for that. There are a lot of changes that will impact this year's testing with some changes with the Virginia State waiver through ESSA. So I'll be outlining all those changes, and they impact next week's testing, and that came at us pretty quickly. So we'll be updating on those testing changes. Basically, the state is taking away a lot of the SOL verified credit testing at the high school. So that impacts a lot of our students who have met grad requirements, who are still in an SOL class, who need it for credit. So that's been an accounting nightmare, but it'll be okay. It's great for kids, though. So I'm glad we're moving in that direction. Let's see, preparation for budget season around the corner. I've been meeting with teachers and grade level departments already to take a hard look at building level instructional needs. We'll also be sending out this year a community stakeholder survey to solicit community input for our school budget priorities, followed by addressing some of the concerns brought up, and that is a similar report to that we did last year. We'll keep you updated as to the changes coming from the state level once we know what they are. We are hopeful that our rural coalition advocacy efforts that we pursued last year were successful in trying to reallocate or revise a rural at-risk add-on in the current biennium budget. So we're keeping our eye on that, but we won't know until later in January how that went. So we're crossing our fingers and hopefully bringing back some dollars to us. We have a half day of school December 20th, when each school has its own special celebration activity to kick off the winter break. At the high school, they'll be putting on their in-house Pride variety show where talented students perform for their peers. And the elementary school has the Virginia Opera Company coming for a special performance for the students. And then we have our holiday break back in session on January 7th for the students. That'll be the beginning of our second semester. So as always, thank you so much for your support of our public schools. It's crucial to our continued success for the youth of Rappahannock. You have any questions for me?
So Dr. Griffin, Macy Montgomery was the only student to come away with a scholarship at the VSBA?
Yes, sir, she was.
Wow.
Yes.
And was she involved in the presentation on the Commit to Be Fit team, or is that the teachers and yourself probably, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But was it related to Commit to Be Fit?
Of course, emphasis on health and wellness, so we hope that has an impact. We haven't measured any direct impact to that extent, but that was a separate entity. She's a very independent learner and took that on herself.
So are these individual exhibits that they have posted throughout the conference and then they're judged for scholarship?
No, it's a competitive application process that Macy had to apply for.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Mhm.
And then, so who decided that she should get the scholarship? Was it some board within VSBA? Or
Yes, it was a selection committee among the VSBA board. Mhm.
Was that in the paper? Did I see that in the paper?
Yes.
Yeah, that's really wonderful.
It was.
Yeah.
Incredible. Second year in a row. Virginia Wyatt won it last year too.
Huh. Well, that's a huge feather in the cap for Rappahannock. But you're literally competing against all the other school systems in the Commonwealth.
Yes.
Well done.
We're very proud. Thank you.
Thanks.
So that brings us to what was F2. Superintendent Flynn from Shenandoah National Park is here, requested a few minutes on your agenda to share what we're about to learn.
This is not designed for short people.
So the mic
I feel your
has a pretty big range, so you don't have to talk.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, I am Jennifer Flynn, and it's my great honor to serve as the superintendent for Shenandoah National Park. I requested some time on the agenda just to continue a tradition that our former superintendent, Joe Northup, started, which was just to come before the board every 12 or 18 months and let you know what's going on in the park and trying to continue to build a relationship with your board and our communities. I thought I would start talking a little bit about what it takes to operate the park. Some folks tend to ask us when we're out and around, what exactly do we do? And I just wanted to remind the board that the park is over 200,000 acres of forested land, 40% of which is congressionally designated wilderness. That's the highest level of protection any federal land can have. We have over 1,406 species of plants and 53 species of mammals, including the iconic black bear. We also care for many cultural objects and sites that tell the stories of the mountain residents, a presidential retreat, segregation, desegregation, and then CCC. We have 4 wastewater treatment plants, 14 public water systems, 500 miles of trail, lodges, campground, restaurants, and of course the iconic Skyline Drive and the commanding views that it has of the Shenandoah, of the Piedmont and of the Shenandoah Valley. Shenandoah was established as a place of recreation and recreation, a place to recharge the body and mind. People come to the park from what they see from the park. There are very few places where you look out onto the park from either Skyline Drive or any of our summits. Often you are looking out onto our communities. Our budget's been $12 million for about the last 9 years. And those of you, I see budgets later on your agenda, a flat budget really is a declining budget. We've had to absorb many cost of living increases and other expenses over the time that I've been at Shenandoah, but we are getting a congressional appropriation of about $12 million. We have the great fortune of being able to supplement that with our recreational fees. So when folks go into the park and pay the entrance fee, 80% of that money stays at Shenandoah, and we have the discretion to spend that on things that directly support the visitor experience. Annually, that's about an $8 million increase to the budget on top of the 12 we get from Congress. We also get financial support from some of our partners. The Shenandoah National Park Trust is our philanthropic partner and annually contributes about $450,000 to the park in grants. The Shenandoah National Park Association is our education partner, and they give us direct support in terms of running the bookstores in our visitor centers and providing direct contact with visitors, as well as some financial support. The Potomac Appalachian Trail Club continues to provide support by doing routine maintenance on over 300 miles of trail, including the 100 miles of Appalachian Trail in the park. And finally, Delaware North is our corporate partner. They run the lodges and restaurants in the park. They're in the 6th year of a 10-year contract with us. This year, they're putting a new roof on the Big Meadows Lodge, and they're doing a major rehab of the Big Meadows Wayside. So those of you that have been at Big Meadows, that's the gift shop and snack bar restaurant that's right there at Big Meadows. This winter, we're flipping those functions. For years, if you went to the restaurant, you sat and you looked out on the parking lot. And on the Meadows side of the building, we had no windows, and we lost that opportunity. So this winter, we'll be flipping that. So when we open in the spring, the restaurant will face the meadow, and the store will face the parking lot, and we think that will be a better visitor experience. The weather's been a challenging year for Shenandoah, as it has been for everyone else in our area. It feels like it hasn't stopped raining for months. Our rainfall measurements at Big Meadows as of November 6th was 84.18 inches. Our prior rainfall record for the year was 76 inches in 2003. So we're already exceeded our prior year record, and obviously we're not done yet. We still have the rest of all of December and the rest of November to calculate. Our average since 1981 has been about 55 inches a year. So we're creeping up on almost being twice our normal average. A lot of rain has meant that the waterfalls and the creeks are full and that fire danger is low, which I sincerely appreciate. However, we are a weather-dependent park, so our visitation this year has been pretty flat. Going into October, we were about 14% down for visitation, but a few really busy weekends at the end of October and the beginning of November have balanced us back out. So right now, we're about even with where we were last year, which was 1.46 million visitors in 2017, and 18 is looking to close out about the same place. Having a national park as a neighbor can be a very good thing. Every year, the National Park Service commissions a study on the economic impact that parks have on their communities. And in 2017, visitors spent $95.8 million in the communities around Shenandoah. That spending supported 1,200 jobs, and that does not include the 300 jobs from Delaware North in the park and the almost 300 jobs that the National Park Service has. Rappahannock County has long understood the value of this relationship, and we appreciate that. You have demonstrated your commitment to dark skies. Dark skies have proven to be a very large draw for this national park. In 2016, we started doing night skies programming, and the first event we did was a moonlit walk on Hawksville Summit. We had over 400 people. Most of our ranger-led programs have 10 to 15 people. We were completely overwhelmed and absolutely underappreciated the desire that folks had to enjoy their night skies. We now have multiple programs throughout the summer, including the Night Skies Festival, which is always highly visited. And again, I just want to reiterate, we've appreciated the work that Rappahannock has done to try to continue to protect the night skies, because they really are very important. We also appreciate the commitment the county has made to maintain the rural character, to protect those things that people look out onto from Skyline Drive and from Shenandoah National Park. That is not something that the park can or should control. That is obviously in your hands, and we appreciate that you value that as well. There are a few ways that we try to stay engaged with you as a board. One is through Celebrate Shenandoah. That was an organization that started with the park's 75th anniversary, and at the end of the 75th anniversary chose not to disband. It's folks from both the tourist community and from local government who get together a couple of times a year to continue the conversation about how we connect our communities on the east and west side of the mountain, so that Shenandoah serves as a bridge and not as a barrier to the communities working together, largely in tourism. And for Rappahannock, your county administrator, Gary Curry, is on that, as well as Mike Binnick. I'm not saying it right.
Actually, it's been changed to San Damascus.
Great.
Those are our tourism.
Thank you. I was wondering. So we have 2 representatives from the county on the Celebration Shenandoah, and that is chaired by the county administrator for Warren County. And we also have the Blue Ridge Committee for Park Relations. The Blue Ridge Committee for Park Relations was stood up in the 1980s when the relations between the communities and the park were not good. And so our congressional delegation strongly encouraged that we set up a mechanism to continue to have conversations. I'm happy to report now that the relationship is good, and we continue to meet twice a year, but now it's just to continue to have a good information exchange and to have a forum for the communities to share with the park and for the park to share with the communities. And your supervisor, Chris Parrish, is your representative on that board. A couple of things coming up in 2019 I think you would be interested in. We have 5 fee-free days. And those are fee-free days for anyone in the country. January 21st is the next one. That's Martin Luther King Day, followed by April 20th, which is the first day of the National Park Week. August 25th, which is the National Park Service's birthday. September 28th, which is National Public Lands Day. And then November 11th, which is Veterans Day. So those will all be fee-free days. And then Shenandoah has one additional fee-free day, and that's the 3rd Saturday in June, and that's always our Park Neighbor Day. This year that will be June 15th, and that's a special fee-free day for Shenandoah only. A couple of things that we're keeping our eye on this year is deferred maintenance. Shenandoah's deferred maintenance balance at the end of 2017 was $79 million. A little over 40 million of that is in Skyline Drive. Not just the pavement, but all of the features that support the drive. We have over 1,200 culverts. So all of those features have a lot of deferred maintenance in them, but obviously we also have historic structures, trails, water systems, and other things that reflect on our deferred maintenance. I mention that because the Secretary of Interior is actively trying to get additional funds to work on the deferred maintenance, and our congressional delegation has also been very supportive of legislation that would get additional funding for the parks. 2 natural things we're worrying about or keeping our eye on are the emerald ash borer. As you know, the emerald ash borer is now fully within our communities, and our ash trees in the North District are already starting to die. Shenandoah has 4% of our canopy is ash. For perspective, hemlock was 0.5%. So we expect that the ash die-off is going to be highly impactful for our forest canopy and very visible to the public. And again, the North District is already seeing signs of that. The last thing that I just wanted to remind the board about is chronic wasting disease. Chronic wasting disease is a prion disease in deer. The closest case has been 10 miles north of the park on the northern side of, outside of Warren County. We have a chronic wasting disease action plan that's been through public scoping that has been put in place about 4 years ago. That plan does call for herd reductions in the event that chronic wasting disease reaches the park. Again, I mention it not because we're implementing it tomorrow, but because we just don't know when. And whenever we lethally remove animals, I know that there is going to be high public interest, and I just want to remind the board that that plan does exist. We do plan to implement it when and if we need to, and I'm happy to share greater detail about that if the time comes, if your communities would be interested in that. Finally, I just want to say thank you again for allowing me this time with you this afternoon. We very much look forward to continuing to work with you as our neighbors and our friends for many years to come, And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about Shenandoah National Park.
I guess I just have one quick one. You mentioned the congressional delegation. You're presently only in 2 congressional districts, is that correct? The 5th and 6th?
Yes, sir. And then our 2 senators.
2 senators, right?
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Jen, with the budget being flat and austere, how many open positions do you still have now up at the park that you haven't been able to fill?
We run at about 20. So right now we have about 20 vacant, and of those 26 or so are approved to be filled, they're just somewhere in the process. But we're kind of chronically running between 15 and 20 vacant positions.
And what percentage of that of your entire staff does that represent? Is it 5% or 10%?
Probably closer to 10.
10?
Well, 7 or 8. We have about 140 permanent people, and then we get another 120 to 140 temporaries in the peak of the season. So that is a fraction of our permanent people. So we're probably at about 8% or so.
And then just a personal request, I suppose. You know how important tourism is to Rappahannock County. As you go forward with your meetings with Celebrate Shenandoah, I just ask you, just as an individual board member, please do not be shy in communicating to Mr. Curry and Ms. Maskus what Rappahannock County should be doing as it relates to promoting tourism in this county, so that it not only helps us, but more importantly, helps the park.
Yep.
So I just ask you, that topic, when it does come up at your board, your Celebrate Shenandoah meetings, please let us know what you would like us to consider.
Thank you. And we're happy to amplify as well. You know, one of the things I'm spending some time on now that I have a deputy is thinking about what else we can jointly celebrate. You know, where we've been most successful is when we've had something to celebrate together. The 75th anniversary, the 100th anniversary of the National Park Service. And so I'm spinning my intellectual wheels trying to think about what is that next thing? What is the thing we can turn into an event that we can all get some energy around. And so I've had a meeting with the chair of Celebrate Shenandoah on that topic, and that's something we're really trying to invest in this year. We feel like we've got some capacity back at the park to get some energy around some special events.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for your time.
Next item is finance.
And this, the first item on the finance is the treasurer's reports. Ms. Nick prepared standard reports as she does each month. Often key on the cash graph. I think it puts a lot of different things together. And as you can see, FY19 will continue to be the top of that curve, of multiple sets of curves. That's a good thing. And you can see the data at the bottom. Ultimately, from what I'm told, revenues are running ahead of where we were last year on taxes. It's very positive. Taxes due on the 5th. So we'll be seeing a big rush coming over the next couple of days in real estate, personal property taxes in. Expenditures are running smoothly as we would expect. The budget public hearing is scheduled for this evening. We'll clean up some of the carryover items that that lead to some of the errant numbers that you see in the percent spend in some of the budget lines. Examples of those include the purchase of the vehicle for zoning and building inspections. So those expenses hit their budgets, but the budget was in last year, so it shows them very high in expenditures on a percentage basis. Once the budget is adopted tonight, that should clean that up. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any other questions on any of the treasurer's reports.
Mr. Curry, I don't know if this falls under treasurer's report, but since it's the treasurer's effort, do you have any sense of how her property, the property auction, for lack of a better way of saying, effort is proceeding?
I do not have an update on that.
Maybe we can get the, if you think January is an appropriate month, or she not necessarily appear here, but I would like to see if there's any success in in that effort, bringing on the law firm to pursue delinquent property taxes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, that brings you to your accounts payable. As each month, you have accounts payable for the mid-month, which is the 15th, in the amount of $9,953.75. And accounts payable dated today, $252,210.32. We'll bring your attention to the fact that today's accounts payable does include the payment to Walker Jones. And as we've discussed in the past, that may require disclosure pursuant to COIA. I've handed out and placed at each of your seats a one-page disclosure form in which you could identify that as a group of 3 or more, you have taken a decision, made a decision that you've done in the best interest of the community, notwithstanding your own personal interests, and that the Walker Jones fees should be perceived as benefiting you. That disclosure statement can be read into the minutes or provided to me in hard copy within 1 business day, and then I'll file it in my office. I'm happy to answer any specific questions.
I guess we have no appointments.
Need a motion and a second to pay the bills.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to pay the bills as presented for, it's both the,
Mid-month.
I think the dates here, yes, November 15th and December 3rd.
Are both the Walker Jones bills related to Bragg 1?
Walker Jones has 1 bill for Bragg 1, and then there's $300 as a continuing rent payment for their commissioner accounts.
I second the motion.
Discussion, I have a question. The check for the Washington Baptist Church? We haven't used the church for a long time for voters, so I've never used that one. Just an odd bill.
It is listed on the polling locations provided by the registrar.
Was that where they did the,
Oh, that's where they go to vote.
they used the Washington Firewall in Washington, but did they use it for the
Possibly absentee or something.
absentee ballot locations, that sort of
I
one?
don't know. You'll have to take a count.
What about the town election, is that for the county?
It's possible, I don't know.
I'm sorry.
I think they would have done that in the town election. I think they would have done that in the same polling place.
They should.
Yes, miss, that would have been used to my knowledge.
Just 5-minute trip.
That's my
Did you say
church.
the orientation possibly?
That's my church, we probably haven't charged enough.
It's $125.
Orientation.
This is provided by the registrar, listing all the different.
It must be an absentee ballot.
There's Washington, Amesville, Sperryville, Castleton, yeah,
Oh,
I thought they did it in an office down there, but I guess they set up something down the street. Well, that's something I didn't know that we did.
I'll get an answer.
That's all I have right now. I guess they weren't supposed to get it, we can get it back.
we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
The next item on your agenda is regarding the mid-month accounts payable procedure. We talked about this last month and introduced a potential idea to the board to modify the process Right now, you have a resolution from April 4th, 2016 that guides staff's process on what bills may be included in the mid-month payroll. That leads to some issues occasionally when the contractor provides an invoice just after the cutoff, and then they have to wait more than a month to get paid, while our payment terms may be 30 days. The Code of Virginia requires that you make prompt payment to your vendors either within 45 days or the terms of the contract. So technically, we're not holding to that. We discussed last month one way to resolve this would be to provide some flexibility in your approval that would allow the chair to authorize certain vendors or payments to be made during the mid-month process upon recommendation of the county administrator. To that end, I've developed a resolution that's included in the packet that is fairly plain and lays out the background stating that Robinson Farmer Cox recommended in FY 2016 in the management letter that we should not be paying invoices late. Further, that 2.2-4352 requires prompt payment, and that you did pass a resolution in the past speaking to the payables. If you were to change your process, you would then have to do that by resolution, in as much as you used resolution last time. The resolution in the packet lays out a new process that guides from the budget holder receiving invoices, reviewing, all the way through the process of approval, and adding in that step that I noted that the county administrator may recommend to the chair to include a particular vendor. Lastly, in the resolution, included a resolution paragraph that requires me to convert this resolution to policy form so it lives on in your policies and on board docs in the policy section. So this is consistent with what we discussed last month. If you have any questions beyond that, I'm happy to take them. If you want to move forward with this, you need to approve this resolution or amend it.
What is the cutoff that we're using, the cutoff date?
Well, generally it's like the Wednesday, Thursday of the week before a meeting. Sometimes we can sneak something in later, and we're subject to weather sometimes or issues, but
Well, it's okay, I'll make a motion to approve this resolution to ensure timely payment of invoices.
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Motion made and second.
And just one question to follow, Mr. Chairman. I noticed in your notes, Mr. Kerr, you coordinated with the treasurer on this.
that's correct. Treasurer approves, recommends, endorses this action.
Thank you.
So it'd have to be a roll call.
All right, motion made and second. We got Mr. Welch, I'll vote aye. Mr. Frazier?
Aye.
Mr. Lozinski?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Parrish?
Aye.
We're up to,
Right, next item is the Board of Supervisors contingency budget process. This is a carry-along item for each month, just showing you where we are. This month I'm actually debooking some funding. We, earlier in September 5th, you reserved $7,500 for my moving expenses. You did not use all of that funding, so now that I've moved, we know we won't have to encumber the full $7,500 from the contingency budget, so I've shown the negative there. In the end, we may not have to transfer all of this. That'll depend on the actual expenditures out of the county administrator's budget as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year. No action, I don't think, needed for that. You just acknowledge the fact that we're not using all that was earlier approved.
well, that takes us to appointments.
Yes, sir, that brings us to appointments. First item on the appointments is for the Agricultural and Forestal Districts Advisory Committee. This item, committee's been on the agenda for a number of months now, and there were a number of vacancies. We're whittling them away. We have currently 2 landowners and 2 landowners engaged in agricultural and forestal production that are needed. We have 2 candidates that have submitted applications, Mr. Woolman and Mr. Grove, one of which is engaged in agricultural and forestal production. Should you approve these 2 individuals, we'll be down to 1 in each of those categories.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Woolman is in my district, and I'd like to put his name forward for this nomination.
And Mr. Groves in my district, and I'd like to put his name forward.
And I'll second those.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Well, we got a volunteer.
Excellent.
So we have 2 more.
2 more. Keep the bushes. And I have to thank the paper. It did run a little blurred last paper, so hopefully that'll pay off.
Or the new members can recruit 2 more.
That's right. Your next item is the parent representative on the Community Policy Management Team. That position is vacant. You do have an applicant, Mr. Mark Rafer, who's requested to be appointed for that position.
So I think he's in my district. He's a good man. I would go ahead and recommend his appointment to the CPMT.
I would second that nomination.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Next is appointment to the fire levy board.
As the board is aware, at your earlier meeting in November, you modified the charter for the fire levy board and modified the method through which citizen representatives are appointed to this committee or board, and they're appointed by the individual board members. So I've reached out to different board members and received names for all of Wakefield right now. Mr. Welch is still looking for a candidate, so if anybody's interested in Wakefield, please see Mr. Welch, and I've put that word out there as well. As much as they're appointed by the individual board members, there's no action for the entirety of the board. So this is really public information and board information.
Okay. Committee reports. Building committee.
All right. I guess it's Mr. Simpson and myself. The board met, the committee met, sorry, on the 26th. And we had a pretty good discussion about several topics. I guess the main topic of discussion was that we are proceeding with meeting with some of the different applicants that have submitted their paperwork to be considered for engineers, architectural firms, and we'll be working through that process to bring something back to the board. That should probably happen at the January meeting. And of course, with holidays, we have to try and schedule the different firms that we selected to meet with. If those aren't, if those don't work out, we have to, look at some of the others that we have kind of set back as a second tier. The ramp here is finished at the courthouse except for the handrails. Mr. Naraki Wicks, well, he was working on that, and as you know, he does good work, but he's behind schedule because of the rain, if nothing else. We discussed several things. We did not come to any conclusive decision on the recommendation for the admin building, except to proceed with, I think, the electrical work, maybe put that out for bid to see if we get competitive bidding on the upgrades for that. My personal opinion that we hold up not doing anything with that building until perhaps we get one of these firms to do a space study to see what the county may need to do with that building. That's all I have right now, Mr. Simpson, unless you'd like to add to that.
My apologies to the board, I was not able to attend the last building committee meeting. I know we have another one, I think that's scheduled for the 17th. And I guess the only thing I would ask with respect to the old county administration building is we did an offer or a proposal from the town of Washington to rent it. If we don't want to do that, or if we want to delay it, or for whatever reason, we should probably at least formally, maybe the committee can make a recommendation to go one way or the other in December and bring that forward in January. Not to say that if we don't decide to do anything, it couldn't be resurrected, but I think we probably owe them some kind of a formal answer. It's just my thoughts, my observations on the building committee.
Well, Mr. Chairman, looking over the comprehensive plan, principle 7, paragraph 8, reads, consider the planning goals, principles, and policies of the town of Washington, and where feasible, undertake joint or coordinated action with the town government and independent county authorities. And so in the spirit of that, I don't see downside to working with the town on letting them use the old county administrative building for their use. They've asked to rent it for a period of 6 months, and they volunteered to spend town money on fixing up the electrical system. We met there about a month ago, and it's evident that as any empty building does, it deteriorates over time if it's empty, and for 6 months at a time, I don't really see a problem with letting them go in there, especially if they're going to go ahead and pay for the electrical update. It would save us money. They've offered $500 a month rather than, I think that sounds okay, but I also think that if we did decide to do that, we should either ask for $500 a month or square footage charge equal to what we're county's paying across the street at the Tuba building or the whatever, Kramer building, whatever you want to call it. And I think that's a win-win situation, frankly.
Well, we discussed that, and we don't really know the square footage. Asked Mr. Jenkins, and we just roughly estimated it could be 500 square feet at $16 is what we're paying for space across the street. That'd be $666, roughly $3,200 for 6 months. And we've got 2 groups that would like a place to meet occasionally. We have a need for it right now. We don't want to use it temporarily. And now the Department of Social Services asked for a space to have supervised meetings with some of their clients. And then the Community Services Board could bring much needed services here to the community if they had a place they could meet with people. So we really have a use for it. And the town is the county. That doesn't take away from that at all. Some of those same people could maybe use some of these same services I just mentioned. So it's not like that we don't have a need for it now, and then we wouldn't have to push somebody out of it. And to go back to that electrical upgrade, the mayor was part of the discussion last week, and they're not ready to commit to, without going back to the town council, they're not ready to commit to $10,000 upgrades. So I think at this time it really would behoove us as county government to not encumber it for 6 months at a time when we have a use for it.
Well, it's just been sitting empty for how long?
I know, it's because we haven't made any decisions.
Right.
But if we make a decision that we're going to fix the electrical work, then we could let these other groups use it until such time as the space study. If there's no need for it, if the space study shows that the county has no longer need for it, then I'll see a problem with
Mr. Curry, do you have anything from the Community Services Board or the Social Services, in form of written offer to?
Probably emails only, communication with myself and Jim McGrath, or myself.
But they spoke here at the meeting, right?
Yeah, Jim McGrath.
Do they have any numbers flying around? Are they proposing anything? That's what
I don't think they're proposing to pay anything, but use our building but it'd be perhaps a weekly use for the CSD, and I'm not sure for supervised visitation.
Obviously, both those groups look to us for part of the budget. This would actually probably save the county tax dollars by allowing them to have a space to meet. They wouldn't have to administer.
There's certainly no harm in finding out, getting a bid on what it would cost to fix the electrical system.
If we don't think we're working, we have one bid, and it's high, so we need to get one.
Okay.
Yeah, it may become competitive, it may come down to competitive bid. What Mr. Kerr suggests, I concur. And then, again, we're talking about tying the new electrical work into the generator, which would give us an EOC, an emergency EOC spot that we do not have now. Right now, our emergency operations center is across the street in the building we have to run extension cords into if the power goes off.
We did confirm there's ample capacity in the generator.
Are there still active phone lines into that building?
That's complicated.
There is a need
Depends on what
that
day.
the county government has several needs for that building.
Maybe we can take it back up for conversation on the 17th if you have more information then, or more bids.
Yeah, it's obviously something for the building committee to look into.
Okay, next item, number 3, broadband.
Tower site.
Tower site.
Tower site, I'm sorry.
We have not met and I do not have an update on this, Mr.
Neither do I don't have anything
So, did we not get any feedback on the backhaul from the,
I've been promised next week for the last several weeks, this week being the most recent next week. So I expressed most recently that the board is very interested in this and received apologies. So I think it's complicated in their world to try to get it costed out correctly and cost shared to the different players like the cell phone providers. So I do believe we'll see something this week given the pressure I turned up last Friday.
all right,
Let us know if we can help with that. Sure.
Now we'll do number 3.
Well, Mr. Chairman, the broadband committee has a meeting set for a week from today, December the 10th, at 5:30 in the library to reconvene. If you recall in our report from last month, I mentioned that Mr. Curry and I were taking a few appointments with different providers as a way of trying to understand better or learn more as to what might be a good fit for Rappahannock County. To that end, he and I did meet with All Points Broadband on November the 14th it was in Middleburg, and got a pretty good, got some pretty good information from Mr. Jimmy Carr and Mr. Innes, who worked with All Points, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Mr. Curry and I have a meeting tomorrow morning with a broadband provider called OmniPoint, wireless internet service provider. They were recommended to us by Mr. Gerhardt in Fauquier County. They have a new technology called LTE, which might have an application in Rappahannock. Mr. Curry and I have also been communicating with Rappahannock Electric Co-op, and I believe they're in the process of developing some type of well, I don't want to say capability. Jump in here, Mr. Curry, if I'm getting this wrong.
Maybe a plan for internal fiber, which was in the works, and I think there'll be announcements over the next month or two on that. Is that right, Mr. Allen?
The board, REC's board has it under consideration, and hopefully this month sometime they will approve it. And then I think we have a meeting set up with you all on the January 11th.
Some years ago, and I'd like to interrupt, but some years ago, REC had a joint venture with Virginia Broadband. Is there any of that still going on?
Not with Rappahannock. Virginia Broadband is still a company locally in Culpeper, and I think in some of the surrounding counties.
So I guess once REC solidifies their fiber plans, then we're going to talk to them and see how does that interface with the communities, with Rappahannock and specifically.
I think fiber's the best, but I don't know how we're going to get last mile with fiber.
Well, and so we'll learn what the opportunities are.
Yeah, that's what these meetings, we're trying to learn a little bit more about the technologies. And of course, any board member is more than welcome to join these meetings, or one of you. But the meeting tomorrow morning with Omnicom is at 10 o'clock at the Visitor Center, if any of you would like to.
Yes, I guess you always slip under for you.
No, sir. That's what I'm saying. I'm
Well, that's slipping under for you with two of us. Or is it a newspaper?
well, I don't write for the newspaper.
Good thing I have them.
And then we have Chantel, which, just Mr. Curry mentioned, I think, a little earlier with respect to the back hall, but I think you're also trying to get an update meeting for them on all fronts related to broadband.
I'm trying not to divert their attention from what I want from for the county, and then we'll take the next step for everybody in the county.
The only thing I will say for Mr. Curry, if he wants to add to this from our meeting with all points, is that from their perspective, it is pretty clear that they look for counties to have skin in the game. They look for counties to either be putting in assets or monies in the form of public-private, in a way of a public-private partnership. It's nothing that we haven't been told before or haven't learned in our work with the CIT, but to start to hear it now from the providers, I would just say that it will probably come a point that if this county does want a real increase in its broadband capability, that it will have to come to the table with some kind of some type of financial program. We don't know what that is. There are grants, there are there's a Virginia Telecom Initiative grant, I think I've got that right. Mr. Curry's experience with them in Gloucester working with Cox, but Comcast has already told us they're not interested in that. Frankly, the OmniPoint meeting tomorrow may explore that. So all avenues, whether it's municipal bonds, public-private partnerships, grants, if this board is interested in really attacking this issue, that's probably something that we should really speak about in earnest as we go into the new year, once we get a chance to complete our homework assignment here, the committee does. So I'll just leave that as a placeholder. And I don't know, Mr. Curry, if you want to add to that, or I got that, if I said that right.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I'll just add that Mr. Lozinski and I are trying to understand what makes some of these providers tick, what moves their needle when it comes to whether they think a project is viable or not viable, worthwhile to compete for or not, what kind of procurement process they think is worth their time, not worth their time. So after we finish this roadshow, then the broadband committee will have some decisions to make on what to recommend the board do going forward relative to procurement.
That's my report, Mr. Chairman. Any questions?
Next item, Rules Committee, Mr. Fraser.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, thank you. As you know, we met last Friday, and as it was already touched upon by a couple of speakers, we had I thought, pretty good bit of discussion there about the one proposal. Mostly is what we've been focusing on is the one that's a little bit tailor-made conversion from Madison County. And I think that between the discussion, the participants there, and then county attorney and county administrator will be making some, a draft copy available that we can review one more time, I think, before we release it to the board for suggestions. I think it's pretty, a little over an hour discussion, pretty good discussion.
There is a video of the meeting that was created by our CCE, and you can seek that out on YouTube if you're interested in the details. And the only thing else I'll add is that the current thought is that this would be codified in Chapter 30 of the county's ordinance, which is the meetings.
Track.
And so we won't lose track of it. It won't be in the minutes book from 2018 when we're, or 19 as the case may be, when we're looking back in several years, we'll know right where it is. And that brought to the table a complexity in that if you are not in compliance with our ordinance, then it can be deemed a misdemeanor. And so, that really flew against the intent of this section. And so Mr. Goff drafted some language for the code to make it clear that it would not be a misdemeanor. When it comes to, will be a recommended ordinance change, and then we would have to go through public hearings and we'll hear from the public on what they think about what will probably be Chapter 30-5.
So at the very end of it, it's got, in addition, by majority vote, which is crossed out, the board of supervisors may remove members. Board-appointed boards or commissions for violation of provisions of this code is permitted by law. Is that because the permitted by law makes the majority vote thing redundant?
Well, I think it already spoke to majority earlier on, and it was redundant.
But the board can't function without a majority vote.
Exactly, that's what I was saying, yeah.
But I think there's going to be an addition of what was Madison's 6. I don't know where we're going to stick that. We have to re-enumerate these. But some additional language in 13. Our current 13. I think we'll have a fairly good document when we get it back together. There's no point in scheduling a meeting until Mr. Goff has time to work on it.
I've reduced the contents of the meeting to notes and sent them on to Mr. Goff, and he's got it and he's working on it.
It'll be sometime this month or again.
We'll let you know as soon as it's ready for consideration.
Oh, yeah. I hope to get it done before Christmas.
All right, that takes us to the next item.
I guess this is a placeholder thing that I've asked for month after month, and I haven't been working on it. But I would like to say that according to a couple of things under new business, it looks like we're going to need it. Because we've had, we just adopted that resolution whereby the mid-month billing would have to be reviewed by the chair and the county administrator to be approved for prompt payment. And if we do anything at all toward this board meeting, moving toward a consent agenda, we're going to have to do something along those lines because nearby localities, that's exactly what they do. They have a finance committee that meets prior to the regular meeting, and they review and approve the accounts payable before they go to the board. So actually, we're creating. The board may be creating a new board review committee. So I'll leave that there. And again, it's pretty much been on me, but I will try to see if we can't meet with Mr. Kucinski and maybe the chair during the next month, and we'll see if we can put something together to make a proposal the first 2 years.
Independently, I assume you mean?
Yeah, I'll slide under 40. Yes, sir. Intentionally slide under 40, yes, sir. Or does it slip under?
Slip slide.
deteriorating landline telephone service.
Thank you. Just a brief update. I noted in my reporting to the board that our overall numbers of landline complaints that are coming to administration have gone way down. We had, I think, 3 this month up until the newspaper ran their article, which brought in a few more, which was great, because that's exactly what the article needs to do, let people know that if they're having problems with the telcos, they can contact administration, and generally we're able to work with, as I said in the article, the humans involved to actually get something done rather than some offshore database. So I've been very pleased with our connection to Verizon and CenturyLink. I wish they were able to more adeptly handle their service calls through their systems, but they've been very responsive when we call them.
That is an improvement.
I spoke to someone that lives on Harris Hollow yesterday,
Yes.
and sounds like they're still having extensive issues.
Yeah, I spoke to somebody in Harris Hollow yesterday as well, maybe in the same person, and it comes and goes, and they have static or echo, and we keep pressuring. I tried to turn up the pressure on CenturyLink and try to engage them in capital infrastructure, and they really didn't want any part of that conversation. So I think with that, it's continue to be the squeaky wheel, continue to make sure that the tickets are getting in the system, which is important to their end. And if we don't feel like we're being heard, continue to make sure the SEC has records of this information. And that's where the pressure comes. Now, Mr. Goff did do some research. We talked at the board a couple months ago about our legal opportunities. I'll let him chime in on the extent of that research.
Yeah, I did do some research, and there's a whole chapter in the Computer Administrative Code that tasks the SEC with policing the services that are being provided by public service companies, utilities, including these phone companies. The interesting part about it is that there's a sunset provision at the very last subsection of the chapter that sunsets it as of 2012. And gives the agency, the SEC, the right to keep the authorization or the code section active. It appears that it is, but I don't have any confirmation from the Attorney General on that yet. I'm still trying to find out. The long and short is, I think the point of putting pressure on the phone company through the SEC is the legal avenue for the county. If the problems persist, I think that the board could certainly petition the SEC to review the performance of that company in our county.
And as you recall, one of the first things we did was write the SEC. And we have had a good relationship with them. Haven't talked to my contact in a while. Our talking reminded me of the conversation he and I had where I was supposed to provide him the name of my contact, and I haven't done that, so I apologize.
Did we send that letter, was it February or March?
I believe it was the February Public Safety Committee meeting, and so it's probably in March.
Well, we're in the new business. Resolution to support Head Start. Mr. Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has my name on it, and I think this is something that the board is very familiar with, given the involvement in the loss of the Head Start program by Skyline Cap a few months ago, and the scramble to get it up and going here through CCLC and the schools and the Department of Social Services to some extent. Now those groups, those three entities are collaborating to apply for funding so that this board doesn't have to, doesn't have to scramble to fund it. We may still have to, but they're going out to the state and the feds, I guess, for an ask for 2019, and a lot of that is laid out in the resolution here. They are, there's collaboration between the public schools and the Child Care and Learning Center on this, Department of Social Services and Public Schools and CCLC strongly support the restoration of the federal Head Start program funding to the county. And so these groups are simply asking us to pass a resolution showing our support for this effort, and we're partnering together to get funding, and then they will come back and provide us, through this resolution, updates on the status as it becomes available with a full report to us by June of 2019. So board members are welcome to take a look through this resolution. I think there's clearly been shown, this board has shown that it wants a Head Start program, that we made it available to 17 children, and I think it's even more than that. We're going to fall through the cracks without this board stepping in, and we want to keep that going. So I'll go ahead and make the motion that we pass this resolution for showing support, for expressing support for regaining funding for the Head Start program in Rappahannock County.
I have a motion.
I'll second it for discussion.
Motion made and second. Discussion.
If we adopt this resolution, is it, I had a complaint or two, actually, after the resolution concerning that the board voted for several months back, that we didn't look at any other outside organization other than Child Care Learning Center, and I just want to make sure that we will have an open process if the county continues to commit to Head Start funding. That we sole sourced this without doing any resolution to that effect.
I can tell you, as I was reviewing this resolution and suggesting edits, I sought to make it as neutral as I could as to the ultimate.
That's the way I see it, but I just want to make sure that we are leaving an avenue open in case there are other providers that can come forward.
Right, we know that there are certain requirements for providers to be able to deliver Head Start, but as a community or county, I don't know that we don't have a need for it to be only one provider. If multiple providers can come forward, that's even better.
Right, and we can't sole source something without making a statement.
Yeah, I think we can talk through the procurement process. But this does not identify any particular, it doesn't identify that the board wants Head Start funding to go to a particular.
Right, it looks like to me we're just mentioning that we have this contract or whatever right now, so I just want to make sure that I'm reading this and understanding it right.
Yeah, I think the intent was to say there are many kids that in fact are being served at CCLC right now. They're real people, not none, and that's a critically important data point as a historical marker, as opposed to skyline cap suggesting we didn't have a need. So that's the historical information in the whereas paragraph. But the resolved paragraphs are the key of what the board is actually putting the force of the board on.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any complication with the program before was Head Start, and that's how this resolution reads, is Head Start. But the program it now exists is referred to as First Steps. Are we seeking to reinstate Head Start and discontinue First Steps eventually? Or would, if Head Start survived, would it be continued to be known as First Steps?
I'm not sure that the naming is, I don't know how important the naming is. What we want is the Head Start funding.
Okay.
And so that's what this is all about, bring in the revenue.
And this resolution will help us apply for grants, is that?
Well, that and show to our legislative representatives that we have a need,
Right.
and not just the county administrator or the superintendent or Director of Social Services, but the Board of Supervisors recognizes the need and is coming to you hat in hand saying, make this happen for us.
My only other concern was that it might conflict with the grant that we had made the motion to approve last month. And I spoke to Dr. Grimsley about it before this meeting, and it seems like rather than conflict with that vote, it's actually a complement to that vote. So that kind of cleared that up for me as well. Thank you for that.
And that's a very competitive grant, although I know the team did a great job on it.
We voted last month, and it was the secret grant that's a 3-year cycle, a $250,000 grant that would basically fund this sort of program.
Okay, any more discussion? Roll call vote. Mr. Frazier?
Aye.
Mr. Lozinski?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Perry? Aye. And I also. All right, item number 2 in new business, budget development schedule.
Here we are all over again. It seems like we've just finished the FY19 budget process. We're here scheduling the FY20 budget development schedule. I've included as an attachment the overall schedule that threads the additional meetings for budget in with all of your existing meetings and school board meetings. As I've noted to the board in my reports, one of the meetings that was included, and let me say that this schedule is very similar to how the budget development progressed last year and the budget schedule that was adopted last year. One of the differences between this schedule and last year's schedules, it does not include a joint meeting with the school board. Although we know that a joint meeting with the school board never happened last year anyway because of weather. That is a result of school board meeting discussion that the superintendent can speak more directly to. My understanding is that the school board thought that those meetings tend to be the two boards sitting on a stage together, receiving information and not really having much dialogue. They thought enhanced dialogue between the superintendent and the county administrator would probably be just as good, if not better. I leave that for your discretion unless the superintendent has any other input on that. So happy to take constructive criticism on how you would like to develop your budget. I thought last year worked fairly well. And all of these dates and times and locations are available. If you were to approve this schedule, I'll notice all these meetings within the next couple of weeks, and then your FOIA obligations will have been met, and the public will know when all these meetings are, and you won't have to worry about last minute noticing in 3 days and all that, unless we change something or continue a meeting.
So, Mr. Curry, the way this is set up, then it's on us as individual board members to attend the superintendent's budget presentation if we want to get some type of a live presentation on.
That's correct, and you would be receiving information if more than three or more board members were there. You wouldn't be able to participate, but you could receive information and not dialogue.
Because we typically will get that as a joint board, correct? When we start with that, or well, you weren't here, so.
Well, the superintendent will be doing a lot of work on her budget, earlier than that. But of course, that was originally scheduled for the 19th, so I'm sure she's doing a lot of work. And you can see the overall budget here. The school board will be discussing budget as early as, well, they already discussed it at their November meeting to set their schedule, and they did not include a joint meeting in their schedule. And then looks like on January 8th there'll be some original informational presentation stemming from the governor's budget. So they're jumping right into it, as will we.
If I could, not having a crystal ball, not being able to see much further than my next meal sometimes, I think it's a little early to say that we're not going to want to have a joint meeting. That's okay. with it, but we may, I'm just speaking for myself. I would think maybe the board might want to.
Well, I would recommend that if the board does want to have a joint meeting, the 19th is still microphone date. I don't know about the school boards. Just as far as, it'll be after you receive my budget, it'll be after superintendent has had their public hearing on their budget, so it's a good time to do that. But you don't have to adopt that meeting schedule now. You could add that meeting at any time, so long as you notice it.
The board may want to, I'm just using that as a possibility. I may want to ask for that, or somebody else may want to ask for that.
Scheduling just gets harder and harder before you get to a meeting to actually get a quorum. And that's what happened last year when we had to move a meeting due to weather and quorum issues of trying to find dates when everybody could be there. Superintendent?
Yes, sir. I just wanted to add that they weren't at all opposed to the idea,
Right, I
just the
understand.
effectiveness of it. And they said, even Mr. Mills suggested if you wanted a meeting of a special budget presentation with myself and the CFO, so you can ask questions and something like that, that might work as well. So it's up to you. We're not opposed to any of that. Just,
Sure, no, I didn't read that, though. I just said, it's kind of hard for me to say that at this time. I don't think we will. We don't this far away from the, we have no idea what the budgets are going to look like and what the state's going to, it's usually due to us and not for us. So I just thought maybe we could do that as a possibility. One of us may ask for that. And the last meeting I had with Wes was a very good meeting, very formal, you know. We were able to discuss a variety of things.
The last thing I would say is, last year I presented this to you as a resolution, and then when we got into having to make a couple of changes, you have to change that resolution with a resolution. So I'm recommending this year we do it with a motion, just to be a little more flexible and lighter on our feet to be able to make last minute changes if necessary.
If you need to just put forward this form of a motion, I'll do that.
And that would be the bulleted list of additional meetings that are shown on within board docs. March 13, March 18, March 20, April 4, April 5, April 22nd, April 29, and and May 13th. Any of those meetings that we determined we do not need, this was the case last year, you can cancel.
Cancel.
Second.
Motion made, second. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carried. EMS cost recovery.
I look back over historical action of the board. It seems like every year or two, the board has taken action to update your EMS cost recovery billing rates. This is a request that came out of the Fire and Rescue Association of Chiefs. The rates that you bill are supposed to be such that you ensure that Medicaid is not paying the highest amount to be fair. And so the way that's done is with recommended rates that are 50% higher than the allowable Medicaid rates. The chiefs have done the math, and you can see the recommendation up on the screen right now in one of the attachments that shows the 2018 Medicare allowable rates, our current rates, the recommended 150% level, and then the required increase. So the Association of the Chiefs are asking that you approve the recommended rates that's listed on the page for billing. Now this, by policy within the association, also the companies, they all agree to charge the same rate, all of our 6 EMS companies.
Does this need a resolution?
I thought that was probably done by resolution in the past. I did research, and in fact, we've done it by motion in the past.
Okay, I couldn't remember. Thank you for looking out ahead.
So a motion to approve the rates as recommended or otherwise would be appropriate.
And you say these go into effect on January 1st?
Whenever you want them to, actually. It is up today. Would be my recommendation.
For today? I'm going to care.
Well, I'll go ahead and make the motion to recommend these rate changes as of today.
Approve the rate changes.
Approve the rate change, right. Excuse me.
We'll ask for them as soon as possible, so I would second.
Motion made and second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Discuss the supervisor's standard meeting agenda layout. I think I know what that's about.
Had some dialogue through email with my reporting to the board on my interest to have a standard agenda layout. I've been moving towards this standard agenda layout, but not one driven by board policy or ordinance. Your Chapter 30 doesn't include a specific layout of what items are to be handled in what order. It doesn't say public comment should be at the beginning or the end or anything like that. It just says you should have it. So I took the liberty just to throw something together just as a straw man to get dialogue and conversation started. It's too long. I think it should be shorter, but I'm not sure how to accomplish that. One of the things that this board has done historically is handle old business and new business, and it's not clear to me why you do it other than maybe Robert's Rules item. Of course, you don't formally follow Robert's Rules. You don't have a requirement that something has to be heard twice before action or anything like that that would require you to discern between old and new business. So I'm not sure why we segregate them on an agenda. But you can continue doing that.
How long have we been doing it?
I have no idea. Perhaps forever, but you would know better than I do. How long, I don't know how long the Rappahannock's been doing it.
Yeah.
I can tell you the community that I was last in, there were simply regular meeting agenda items where action was to be considered, presentation items where there was no action really to be considered. And then your standard other items for appointments or meeting minutes approval. In my last community, we also used consent agenda, which Mr. Frazier mentioned a little bit earlier. You noted that in that conversation that perhaps a subcommittee could review documents ahead of time, and you can certainly do that. But a consent agenda, as envisioned here or otherwise, it doesn't require that. It just allows you to approve multiple items at one time without digging deep into them. But that does put the onus on you as board members to dig into that material ahead of time and make sure you've reviewed it. Now, if there's anything within those items, say accounts payable, that had a question, when you would adopt the agenda, you would request that, for example, in this outline, consent agenda is listed as E and accounts payable is 2. You would request that E2 be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately.
Any simple amount, that's the way they do it.
Yeah, well, and it would be, going into the, and you could adopt in a rules of procedure that only one member, it only takes one member to pull something off as opposed to a majority to approve amended agenda or something like that.
No, I think that's the way that they do it in a lot of jurisdictions, just one member.
Yeah, and that's what my most recent locality did. But it helps with some of the more mundane items that we go through every month. While it's important and we want the information to be pushed to the public, we want the public to see all the AP and every check that was cut to everybody. Most of the times we're reviewing and approving those without too much detail needing to be or questions need to be asked. You've already looked at them ahead of time and you're ready to make that approval when you get here, or you're not, and you pull it off.
And those documents would still be on board docs?
Everything would still be on board docs. It would just be under a top heading called consent agenda, and then the sub-items would be anything. And it could be things like the annual health department contract. right? So it's every year the health department comes to you and asks you to approve the contract or authorize the chair or myself to sign that contract. It's really a perfunctory action. There's not a lot of questions. If you had questions, you could pull it off, but it could be included on there.
Like our reports.
Right, and so, but the reports don't have action to them. And you know, I did include the treasurer's reports because I sought to eliminate the finance category, and they needed to go somewhere, but they could go into just a report out. You know, those documents don't require action of the board, but any action item for the board could go into the consent agenda, presuming that it wouldn't benefit by a robust discussion before a decision. And that's one way to attempt to shorten meetings a little bit while still giving all the opportunity for discussion if necessary.
Could you also just take a motion to approve the consent agenda in a second, and then
yes,
board members can raise any questions they have on anything in the consent agenda during discussion? Is that another way to do it, or is the preferred way to just pull it?
Yeah, I would. I've not seen it done that way. But of course, if you had 5 things on the consent agenda, a board member would move to approve the consent agenda as presented. Second, approved, and then it's everything within that item, all 5 would be approved.
But you're saying it only takes one board member to request that something be removed from the consent agenda.
And that would be before action is taken.
The only
and that
thing
is
I have
action.
with the consent agenda is the workforce network, and there's 11 localities represented there. We always have a quorum. It's pretty tough to get 10 or 12 people together, so. Anyway, we have a consent agenda, but we have the rule that one member can, and it's never been used in my knowledge.
Yeah, so what I would recommend happening here, if you want to move towards consent agenda or a standard agenda format, that we develop a policy. It'd be a board policy, it'd be listed in your policies, and that policy would state that one board member can pull off whatever those rules are that you want, and the board would take action on that policy. You include the layout, include the rules for how consent agenda is going to be dealt with, and then you would have confidence to know that that's how it's going to work going forward. And if you wanted to change that, you'd have to change your policy.
I could foresee the first month or two, maybe a member or two would want to see something, but I think after we get into the swing.
And the idea is, it's all in there, it's all on board docs, it's all available to the public. So I don't want to get bogged down with just consent agenda. These other items, you know, are they needed, are they not needed? We historically, the board took action to require public comment at night and at day. I think that makes sense. There's no detail on which items should be at night other than the clerk or administrator is to work through the agenda with the chair after the preliminary agenda is prepared, and then the chair reviews and approves that before it goes live. And then, of course, the board can adjust the agenda however you want by vote when it's presented here. Is there any other information that you would want to change any of the layout of what's here, or otherwise add items, remove items?
Well, does it make sense, because since this board is reorganizing next month, to wait for the, not to say there's going to be any change, but does it make sense that
I envision that it would probably be.
I would think the chair, whoever the chair is, would want to have input on this.
Well, I think the whole board would, but I guess I thought they would be referred to the rules committee, quite frankly. After you wrap up what you're doing now with the code of conduct and code of ethics, if this was something that the board wanted to tackle, you refer to the rules committee to get into some detail and then make a recommendation to the board in the form of probably a policy.
So they would put it off to January 30th anyway.
Yeah.
This seems reasonable.
We have a consent agenda at the school board. You know, it's on the school board, so it works well if it's done right.
A year or two ago, I wasn't in favor of something like this, but after a couple of back-to-back 5 and 6 and 7 hours meetings, frankly, I'm looking forward to doing something.
Well, if we can take the things that don't require robust discussion and get them taken care of without, you know, sometimes we just like to talk, self-included, like right now, this whole thing, then we can spend more time on those critical tasks.
Thank you for your work on that, Dan.
Next item is continued employment of Deputy County Attorney. This is for Peter Luke. You want to explain some of the needs on it?
Sure, Mr. Luke's, as you know, been very, very helpful with not only the Bragg 1 litigation, but also some projects that required a lot of institutional knowledge. Particularly one question that came up recently where nobody had any idea where to start, find the answer. Peter knew where to look for it, and that was, were there any legal restrictions on the former county administrator's office building located here on the courthouse grounds? That required him to make a trip down to Culpeper to look at some of the original deeds and grants where the county obtained the initial lots. And Peter's remarkable in his depth of institutional knowledge. He wants to be limited to no more than 8 hours per week. There's some weeks in the past few months where he's done nothing at all. There hasn't been a need to, but I think that the board is well served by Peter's continued involvement, especially on that. And of course, he was just here in court arguing a motion in Bragg 1. His knowledge of Bragg 1 also is deep and essential to y'all's defense.
Any discussion?
Well, yeah, in addition to that, I know that sometimes it's, our regular attorney, Mr. Goff, has some conflict or whatever, he needs some help, he can call his deputy and he can fill in temporarily. So I think it makes sense to continue his employment for another, I think it's another, 6 months from the asking here?
I think it's 7 because it expires at the end of July.
In July, okay.
Is there a reason why it ends July 31? It's a month after the budget cycle ends. It's a month into the new budget.
I don't recall why Mr. Luke set that date, other than that I think I know he's going to be gone. When is he going to Key West, Mr. Parrish? It's mostly the whole month of February, isn't it?
It's just, I think it's the last week of January and then the first 2 weeks.
The first 2 weeks of February. So he's going to be completely out of pocket for that. So I don't know, maybe he was thinking that it would be a 6-month thing, but because he wasn't going to be here for those 3 weeks that he extended to. But I'm just speculating. I don't know if there was a particular reason.
Yeah, I had the same question as to why July 31 instead of June 30 to line up with fiscal year. I noted that as well. I would just say given all of the litigation, ongoing litigation that we still have, and the model that we have with the split county attorney, Commonwealth attorney model, I can appreciate that we need some additional help. However, I heard Mr. Sonnet's comments loud and clear. I'm inclined to do this one more time. My personal opinion, to do this one more time, but this board really needs to figure out, what the long-term solution might be beyond this. Because I don't know. Hopefully, we won't have all this litigation 6 months from now, and we won't have to worry about it. We won't need a deputy county attorney, and we can just continue with the model that we have now without a deputy role. But my opinion is, unfortunately, that we do need a deputy to assist with the workload that we have right now.
Could we just make this agreement end with the budget cycle?
Mr. Luke has signed the version that was provided to me. I don't know if he finds that acceptable, but you would find out.
I would think that it doesn't make any difference. There might be a typo. Because I don't recall having a specific discussion.
Certainly, as an employer, it's up for the board to make an offer and the employee to accept it.
When I think back of the discussion in August, I seem to recall there were 2 compelling reasons that we voted to renew this employment opportunity for Mr. Luke. And the 2 reasons were the murder trial, which is since wrapped and should have freed up some time. And the other compelling reason that we voted to renew this was that we had voted in the month of July to seek settlement terms. And it was my understanding that Mr. Luke's renewal would be used to pursue settlement terms. And I have not seen any settlement terms to date.
Well, as I've repeated, I know this is probably the fourth or fifth time, I've asked Mr. Connick in emails and in person to give us a number. You know, tell us what it is he wants in the terms for settlement, and then I'll bring it to you all. But he has not been forthcoming with that.
Well, that was in the month of,
His email back to the board and to you were that for you to draft a term of settlement.
Well, I'm not going to do that because why should we bid against ourselves? Shouldn't we have a number from him before we start talking about, you know?
Well,
I have no idea what.
If I remember reading that, though, they want more than, and I haven't seen anything as far as sums either, but they want more from this board instead of just a check.
Well, the only time we had any kind of real email exchange about that was way back before, that was, I'm trying to think when that was. When we made an offer to settle, he said, are you interested in settling? And that, I think, was going on almost 2 years ago when we had that email exchange. And it was like, there were terms that required each board member to take a remedial FOIA class. There were an admission of public guilt of you know, violating the statute, and there were a list of demands, but there was no amount of money. But that was left you know, like I said, I've asked him several times, how much is it you're asking for?
but what activity has happened in that vein since this vote in August?
Nothing.
That was July.
Correct, nothing. So my concern continues to be, I see action on the part of the 4 individuals in the case, but I do not see any action on behalf of this board's most recent vote on how to handle this matter. Which is what I was led to believe I could expect if this contract was renewed last time.
Well, as to the conduct of the litigation, right now, we are in this phase called discovery, where each side gets to ask the other side questions. A lot of times, when the discovery phase is over, that's when people talk turkey about settlement, because now the facts are on the table. As of now, we're still in the process of propounding questions to them, or we have done that, we're waiting for their answers, and we're assembling our answers to their questions. So once you get to that phase, you know, and then you start to look at the motions for summary judgment and kind of get the case creamed down, you might have a realistic opportunity to settle it. I don't see that happening right now.
Well, this may not be the right time, because we have later on in the agenda to talk about legal matters. But could you reiterate what you just said about the discovery process?
Right now, we've sent them interrogatories. Interrogatories are written questions that require written responses. We've also, as you know, issued subpoena duces tecum.
You, as the county attorney for the Board of Supervisors, you and Mr. Brown have subpoenaed me.
Yes, we have. Yeah, we
I've
have.
never seen or heard of anything like that.
Well, maybe you've never been sued before or been involved in litigation like this, but it's very common.
But I can't imagine a situation where the attorney for the Board of Supervisors sends a member of that board a subpoena for information that you could have simply asked for if it existed or not.
Well, because it's required to be answered under oath and under certain time periods. So,
Have you sent it to any of the other board members?
no,
Why was that singled out?
because you're not a party.
I am a party as a member of the Board of Supervisors. I do not understand why anybody cannot read that much into the litigation. It says the Board of Supervisors, and then it names 4 individual respondents.
Yeah.
This board had to take a vote to allow you and Mr. Luke to represent the 4 individual respondents. Your first duty is to represent this board, and then the 4 individual respondents.
No, you're wrong.
You don't represent the board?
I do represent the board.
But you've never said that.
And because the board operates by majority vote. If 3 members of this board say do this or don't do that,
We did that, according to what Ms. Smith just told you, we did that back in July.
Well,
And nothing has transpired on that.
Mr. Connick has not given me a number, Mr. Frazier. I've told you that. I don't know why we're hopping from one thing to the next. The first thing is, do I represent the Board of Supervisors? Well, of course I do, by statute. The second thing is, do I represent the individual members who were sued? Yes, I do.
By authorization of the board.
By authorization of the board, but there's no hierarchy there. And you know, the board is functioning, like I said, by majority vote.
There's no
My
hierarchy.
instructions right now are to defend this thing, and that's what I'm gonna do. And I'm not gonna argue about it.
No. We're going to have to discuss this at one point in time because I need to have some answers on this because I'm embarrassed to discuss this outside of this county to tell people what's happening with our legal system here.
Well, there's nothing wrong happening with our legal system here.
When a member of
What's
this
happening?
board gets subpoenaed by their attorney.
Yeah, because you carry water for kind. That's why. So.
No, sir, and you're out of order to even talk like that, sir. You are out of order.
Excuse me.
Mr. Chairman, the gentleman just made a statement and you sat there and allowed that. You sat there and allowed that, Mr. Chairman, you tell me to settle down? No, sir, that's not going to work that way.
That was me asking you to tell me down.
Well,
The Rules Committee, remember the thing about civility?
Mr. Chairman, you sat there with the gentleman right behind you that made that statement. You want to talk about civility? Right there.
I'm not arguing with anybody.
You didn't have time. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
If, concerning this resolution, if we alter it to end at the fiscal year, then it goes back to Mr. Luke and he can accept it or not, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd like to go ahead and put that in the form of a motion that we go ahead and rehire Mr. Luke for another period of time till the end of this fiscal year. And everything else would remain the same. That's a motion.
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Motion made and second. All those in favor say
It's a roll
aye.
call.
What's the roll call? Oh, yeah. Mr. Frazier.
Aye.
Mr. Lozinski.
Aye.
Ms. Smith.
Nay.
Mr. Parrish.
Aye.
And I vote aye also.
I guess this would be the opportune time to notify the board that I'm going to be making use of the litigation fund and hiring my own attorney for representation, according to the resolutions that this board has adopted in the past.
Is this the next item review legal matters?
Well, it could be here or there, but since we're here, I'll just make it now. It appears that I don't have any representation as a board member. And I don't see where the board has any representation for that matter.
Okay, thanks for letting us know.
I think we're at L1.
Are there, Mr. Brown is here to further discuss the review of legal matters if necessary. Mr. Frazier had asked him to be present in case it was necessary. Walked in at a perfect time, was going to stand by his steps. So I don't want to move on and without having that opportunity afforded.
I just want to reiterate my concern that there's no one working in the interest of the most recent vote of this body to seek settlement terms. No action has been undertaken on that since July or possibly August. That was how we were led to believe that we were continuing to employ certain individuals. And I don't understand why a majority vote of this board has not been pursued further. And if that requires perhaps compartmentalization of the legal team or assigning duties to the legal team to accomplish that end, I think we should do it.
I'm wondering how in a FOIA litigation suit, this thing is progressing forward with no vote from this board in public. How did that happen?
How did what happen?
How does this case continue to go forward with no vote from this board? You and Mr. Goff, neither one of you have sat down with this board and discussed anything since July.
I'm happy at any time to come to speak with the board about whatever questions.
That's my question is, how have you been able to proceed on behalf of this board without having any interaction with it?
The litigation proceeds, the litigation will proceed without any authorization from the board unless the board directs counsel to simply not participate in and represent the board at all in the
Well,
litigation.
we directed counsel at the July meeting to seek terms of settlement. We've been presented with nothing.
I would be glad to go to Mr. Connick and discuss settlement, but I need direction from the board as to what the board has in mind in terms of what to offer.
We're not lawyers. We don't know the first thing about how to put something together. That's why we've retained all kinds of lawyers. We've got county attorney, we've got 2 deputies, as far as that goes right now, yourself included. You're working in that position.
Do you want him to suggest some kind of settlement, or do you want the board to? Because I just heard both things in the last 30
But
seconds.
the board has authorized its legal representative to seek terms of settlement and nothing has happened. So I don't understand how the case keeps going forward with no interaction with this body.
Well, I think Mr. Goff spent some time talking about the effort to settle, which was met with, we didn't get all the information back in which to make that decision, if I heard Mr. Goff correctly.
We didn't get a number, and Mr. Connick's been playing this game for as long as I have, if not longer, and he knows how the game is played. We ain't gonna bid against ourselves, that's silly. Why should we make the opening? He's the plaintiff, he's the one seeking redress in the courts, not us. And Mr. Brown's right. Once the litigation starts, it's kind of a machine that runs of its own spring. The rules say what the time limits are by which we have to respond to certain happenings. That's what Mr. Brown and I and Mr. Luke have done.
Right, well, what I would like to know is how did either one of you take it that you had authorization to subpoena members of the board that you're supposed to be representing?
We got authorization over 2 years ago from this board to represent the board and each of the members who were sued individually, and that's what we've been doing ever since.
But you told me that you only subpoenaed me, you haven't subpoenaed the other members, so you're not.
I'm not going to subpoena my own clients, Mr. Frazier.
The board is your client.
The board is my client.
And I'm a member of that board.
Yeah, well, that's right. You're one member of a 5-man board. That doesn't give you any authority at all in this matter.
And you have had no authorization from the other members to proceed the way that you've been doing.
Yes, I do. I have their plenary authority.
Where?
I have the resolutions that were adopted in the beginning.
But they adopted them as a board, and you singled me out as a non-member of that.
Because, Mr. Frazier, you chose to avail yourself of Mr. Connick's offer and accept
I didn't choose to avail myself of any offer.
member in the suit, Mr.
I'm not a named individual. No, I'm a member of this board that is also involved in the suit, both suits.
Well, your role is really nothing as a member of the board, because the board acts by majority vote.
The board has one vote in the last 6 months, and that was to seek terms of settlement, and you ignored that.
I did not ignore that.
What did you
I
do?
sought the number from him, and he didn't give me one.
I saw one email from you to him.
Yeah, so I acted on.
He said that part of that was you would have to apologize for your public comments that you have made. And you've made derogatory comments about me, and you have been proven wrong by the Virginia Supreme Court.
No, I have not.
Mr. Chairman, this is a bullying session.
No, it's not a bullying
This is nothing
session.
more than a bullying session.
It's not a bullying
Mr.
session,
Frazier,
sir.
County attorney.
I
mean, this
He
is
has
order.
I have the floor. He has made derogatory
I
comments
said
about me.
order. You don't have the floor when I say order. You can do a lot better for yourself if you just toned it down.
I'm toning it down, sir.
They're hearing you outside, Ron.
I'm toned it down. The gentleman has made derogatory comments about me in public, and the Supreme Court ruled his opinion out of order. They were wrong.
Well, let's go ahead and skip this and let's see if we're gonna hire Mr. Luke for another 6 months.
I would just say that if the effort to seek settlement on this matter had been applied to any other matter before the board, I believe it would have been viewed as lackluster at best. It is not acceptable. That's all I have to say.
Well, if I could just say one simple thing, and that is that I didn't do anything wrong. I'm innocent of all wrongdoing that I can see, and that would be the one and only settlement that I would have, Mr. Connick, if he could withdraw the suit. and I'm looking forward to this thing being adjudicated to where, you know, I clear my name and just have it done with. So the sooner the better.
Well, there could have been an offer that was put forward.
I've always maintained that we didn't do anything wrong, and you know, but apparently the only way we're going to get to the bottom of this is have the judge make that decision.
Well, Mr. Brown, can you give us an update? I asked you to come.
Yes, sir. We're in the discovery phase of the litigation. You and I discussed that not too long ago, Mr. President. The most recent court appearance essentially disposed of all the remaining, motions and sort of procedural issues that were still outstanding in the case. We've got discovery requests that we've made to Ms. Bragg through her counsel. We've got similar discovery requests that have come our way. The deadline for those responses are in a couple of weeks. I understand that Mr. Goff and Mr. Curry are communicating about getting some of the emails that we need that are responsive to those.
Mr. Yao did, yeah.
Oh, through Mr. Yao, right, Mr. Yao. So that's where we are in the litigation. There is no trial date yet that's been assigned. At some point, we'll have a date assigned to us by the judge for that. In the meantime, just to get back to that discussion about this settlement offer discussions, I mean, that is something that we can broach at any time. If there's a consensus among the board members that there's an offer that should be made, I'm happy to communicate that to Mr. Connick. I have no problem communicating with him whatsoever. I think that's something that should be discussed in a closed session, if that's the will of the board. And then I'll be glad to take whatever directive this board gives me and do that. I will say this, also speak to another question that you had. The litigation does move forward. It's its own engine. There's no way, and frankly, there's no requirement that the council come back and seek the approval of the board for every motion we have to argue and for every pleading that we have to file. I mean, that's got to happen on its own pace, and that's what we've been engaged in this litigation. I will say that it's now rolling forward. Just to speak to Mr. Parrish's comment, it had been kind of sitting and stalled for a long time while it worked its way through the appeals process, because that's a lengthy process. But now that we're back, and now that these preliminary matters have been disposed of, it's rolling down the track.
You don't have any time frame?
We don't have a trial date. The discovery process in a lot of civil cases, and this has some complexity to it, can take several months. We have the interrogatories and requests for documents that have been exchanged already. I expect that Mr. Connick is going to want to take the depositions of several of the board members and other pertinent witnesses. We're certainly going to want to take Ms. Bragg's deposition and maybe others. So that would be the next phase after this preliminary discovery phase. That takes some time. And it bears pointing out that also it's running the meter, and that costs money. So if there is any kind of a consensus among the board members or a desire to engage earnestly in settlement discussions, the sooner the better.
There was a vote to that effect last July 2018. We voted to
Okay.
settlement terms.
All right, and as I understand, Ms. Smith, there's apparently some preliminary communication that was made, and that didn't result in a productive or favorable response from Ms. Connick. If there is a better sense of what the board, if the board wants to make some kind of offer in settlement, I'm happy to meet with the board in closed session and discuss that in more detail.
But I noticed in your billing that you met with all the other respondents, including Mr. Bennett, who was a former member as well.
Yes, sir.
And have they given you any instructions?
No, sir, I haven't had any instructions from them in those meetings. The purpose of those meetings was so I could understand the facts of the case as each of them viewed.
So you've been proceeding with no instructions from anyone?
To the extent that...
Proceeded under my instructions.
Well, I mean, I have communicated with Mr. Gall.
But he hasn't communicated with us.
I don't attend the board meetings every month, so I wouldn't know, Mr. President.
We've passed resolutions to engage Walker Jones and the county attorney to defend us in this accusation of being violating.
No instructions for him, sir.
To defend us, because as Mr. Parrish noted, you know, we're of the opinion that we did no wrong, at least I am. And I guess that's for the judge to decide at this point. We are looking for counsel to defend us.
No, I don't know that we had anything scheduled today. We do have a placeholder for a closed meeting, but I didn't know that we have actually spelled out what we're going to do here, except for employee performance, so I don't know that we have to do that another day.
I don't really see any need to go into a closed session today.
What about the performance review?
I think that, we had our meeting and
But we had questions for one employee, and we're supposed to at least give them the opportunity to get back to us on the questions we had.
Are we at that point?
Perhaps we should move through the remainder of the day agenda and just discuss that just before we get to item O.
okay. So we're up to the county administrator, I think.
Well, thank you, Mr. Bowman. Sorry to mess up your afternoon.
No, not at all. Happy to see you.
Let's stay for a walk. Okay, County Administrator update. I'll make this quick and try not to be redundant. If you remember a few months ago, we had a conversation about the FEMA flood map community coordination outreach meeting. That meeting was canceled due to weather. And so it's been scheduled again. I believe you all received letters as have planning commissioners December 12th, 10 a.m. to noon in this room. So that is the kickoff of the update of our flood maps here in the community. Happy to report, after much delay, the fire rescue audits are all now done from last year. We had one company that had dragged along due in part to questions by the company and in part to busy season for the auditors. That is now done. Mr. Frazier mentioned ramp, so I won't talk about that. I will make sure the board is aware that the comprehensive plan update is progressing fairly well. The Planning Commission has a work session on the 7th, this Friday at 1 p.m. here. There is a completely updated document, narrative form, graphs and charts in the board docs package for that meeting. Michelle and I are still working to clean up all the maps and graphics, table of contents, artwork, things like that. But the Planning Commission has what it needs for the meat and potatoes of the plan, and we are hopeful that the 7th will be a busy meeting, and they'll make up their mind on a few different factors there, and they'll move that along to a version that they can advertise for public hearing before it comes here for public hearing.
Do you have a printed out paper version of that?
I can.
Well, years ago, we used to keep one over at the library.
Well, I would suggest that we wait until the Planning Commission reaches the point that they're ready for public hearing. Once we do that, I suggest we do provide it in hard copy at the library or possibly my office for
I think we did both, years ago, one at each place.
And that's what I did for the budget as well. Those that can't print it out or don't have a slow speed internet. Relative to the radio system, I am still awaiting a quote from Harris for 800 megahertz sites. They're working on it. It's complicated. I am making progress on the Amosville Tower lease, and it is at no cost, possibly cost for ground space, depending on how that rolls out. And then CWS is in permitting, getting their building permit and their land disturbance permit. Those documents have been reviewed by the Conservation District.
And revisions, I believe, have been back to them, so they should be ready to really turn up here very quickly. Lastly, our county roads map is in the process of being updated. Corrections where necessary, additions, and then putting rivers on the map this cycle, something that was missing from the last version. Those rivers are helpful to give you an idea where you are. And so if any board members have any ideas about the map, please let my office know so we can get that wrapped into the revision. That's all I have on that report.
How about this, that burn pile, in itself, that got taken care of, didn't it?
No, still background. I've asked for an update on the schedule for the green waste recyclers. We have a contract with them, but they're in high demand. So I haven't heard back from Mr. Partlow as to when we fit on his schedule.
Other than soft ground, is there any reason why the rain would be holding them back?
I don't think so. It may be some of their other jobs. If they're doing clearing jobs, working with a clearing contractor, the rain will slow that down, which means
Put the equipment up there.
yeah. But I know that they have contracts with VDOT and they've been traveling all over the place for VDOT, so we have a very good price, and so I think we'll slide on schedule if we can keep that price. What's next?
Now we'll keep going.
Yeah.
Information correspondence.
Okay, just information for the public. Included the letter to VDOT regarding the TAP grant, just so the public can see the correspondence that went. And we have a letter from VDOT confirming the no-through truck restriction on Suns Lane and Water Street in Sperryville. Those signs are in fact up, which is great. And lastly, Comcast let us know that there's price changes for all their customers, as well as programming changes. Information about them in the packet for the public. You then go into reports. You have your building permit report. Notice it seemed to be pretty substantial construction total this period. I'm not sure whose new homes they are, but four at just about $2 million.
Is that one of yours, Mr. Curry?
No. You have your zoning report is provided as an informational item, and then the VDOT monthly report. We'll let the board know that I've had some dialogue with VDOT staff over the last couple of weeks about some of the closures on our secondaries. Crest Hill Road, they had some culvert changes. I think Slayton also had some culvert changes. And those reports, those closures weren't making it into their weekly report. And so I was told they've had some change in staff, and that's been since resolved. There is a closure today and tomorrow on Crest Hill in Fauquier County. That may affect some of our citizens' commutes. And next on your agenda is the closed meeting if you choose to have it.
I did hear from some folks that there were really awful icing problems on Viewtown Road. And VDOT did a good job cleaning that road and taking care of it.
Okay, good.
So I'm going to pass that on.
Get you filled up every time.
I noticed a lot of pre-treating before this last storm, so hopefully that is helping. So we are on the item O of your agenda, which is closed meeting should you decide to hold it. We have a motion printed here for use for the purpose of employee performance.
I think we should follow through with what we discussed Friday night. And we'll complete the process.
I couldn't hear you.
I say I think the board needs to follow through with what we discussed on the 9th and complete the process.
Is that a motion?
Yes, it is.
Are you, do you have the motion up on the screen? You want to read it from there, or?
I can read it from here. I have it. I move that the Rappahannock County Board of Supervisors conduct a closed meeting in accordance with 2.23711A of the Code of Virginia for the purpose of 1, discussion and consideration of performance of specific employees of any public body. 2.23711A1, subject matter of the closed meeting will be performance evaluation for the county administrator. For section 15, performance evaluation for the county attorney. So moved.
I'll second.
Discussion. You know, normally, Mr. Chairman, I would be on board for this because I think it is part of the performance review process. But given what I've seen here today, I really think it's going to be nothing more than a bullion session. So I'm not going to support it. Just want to go on record as saying that.
I think it's premature. I think we just met on this, and we got, there's no emergency to do anything at this point, and I would like to just settle in a little bit and perhaps do this at a future date.
Procrastination seems to be why things are as bad as they are, sir.
My purpose in seconding the motion is that I think, we've given the information out, and I think it's fair to kind of complete the circuit and let Mr. Curry and Mr. Goff follow up with any questions that they may have on the reviews that they received. That's the purpose of the exercise, in my opinion.
Is this the motion right here?
Yeah. Very general.
Discussion and consideration of the performance of specific employees of any public body. And the subject matter will be performance evaluation for the county administrator and performance evaluation for the county attorney.
Of course, you could change the wording of that if you want.
I would love to procrastinate and put that off a little bit. But at any rate, that's just me.
Well, I don't see what difference another month will make. That was all right with you. The board.
You have a motion and a second unless those are withdrawn.
Let's just vote. I think these closed sessions are kind of controversial anyway. I mean, I'd rather talk about stuff as much as possible in public, but the public gets suspicious if we go into closed session what we actually talk about. So at any rate, this is a roll call. I was required to roll call.
Okay. Mr. Fraser?
Aye.
Mr. Lozinski?
Nay.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Parrish?
Nay.
And I vote nay also. We're going to recess till 7.
John.
He's gonna walk up. That'd be pretty good. Hey, Nita. Thank you for our snack bags last night.
I would add to that in today's meeting.
Yes, sir.
So the agenda calls for certification of closed meeting. Of course, you did not hold a closed meeting, so that is not required.
Do not need the certification. Goes up to public hearing.
Yes, first public hearing tonight is for special exception 180901 Windsor Lodge Stables. Conference center event venue. Michelle Summers here to provide an introduction.
Windsor Lodge Stables obtained a special exception last year for a conference center event venue. As part of the approved conditions, the permit was only valid for 1 year, requiring the applicants to reapply for another permit. They have now applied for another special exception for the same use. The property is located at 50 Windsor Lodge Lane in Flint Hill, and it's 432 acres in size. The property is zoned agricultural. This is permitted through the Rappahannock County Code, Section 170-36C and 170-64G. The applicant has proposed modifications to the previous conditions. Those were included within your packets, such as 4 one-day events allowed in a calendar year. The applicant shall notify the Flint Hill and Washington Fire and Rescue Departments, VDOT, and Sheriff's Office at least 30 days prior to the date of each event of 50 or more people, and that the permit shall expire after a period of 5 years. During their first initial special exception permit, they did not hold any conferences or any groups at their facility. The Planning Commission met and held a public hearing on October the 17th. They recommended approval of the request by a vote of 5-1, with the stipulation that the permit be reviewed in 3 years at the end of 2021. And the applicants are present here tonight if you have any questions for them.
Anyone have any questions? Would you like to make a statement?
No.
No, I mean, we've done this so many times, and if somebody has questions for me.
Okay, then we'll open the public hearing. For the public hearing, it gives anybody wishing to speak the opportunity to do so. Just raise your hand to be recognized. When recognized, state your name, your district, and direct your comments to the board. So the public hearing open. Anyone care to speak?
Is this the public comment?
Yes.
Public comment period for the public hearing?
Public hearing for a special exception for all mill farms.
Oh, and that's what the speaking would be likely on. Thank you, sorry to be late.
No one cares to speak? Public hearing closed.
What a difference a year makes.
Yes.
What a difference.
That was your initiation.
As Michelle pointed out, the Planning Commission recommended approval, 5-1. The applicant requested a period be granted for 5 years for their permit. The Planning Commission, however, recommended no expiration, but it be reviewed on December 31, 2021. We've heard that language recently with other special exceptions, and should the board take that route, we just understand that during a review, the only possible outcome that would eliminate the special exception would be revocation for cause because they failed to meet the conditions of their permit. With that, also it'd be my recommendation, if the board is to approve the special exception with no end date, that you issue it to the current owners rather than to run with the land and that parcel forever.
Seems to me like it might make sense just to do the 5 years, what they ask for, and so that.
And that runs with the land.
I think you should run with the owner because that's what other counties do. Even with B and
I
B.
thought most applications like B and B or whatever is runs indefinitely.
Well, we've been doing that here, but I've checked myself personally with Warren County and Fauquier, they do it by the owner. So if an owner's going to sell it, it would be a contingency in a contract that they would apply. I think, that's the way these May amendments from 2001 or whenever they were done, or get to the Board of Supervisors or get to the Planning Commission public hearing, that's one of the changes that's recommended.
If it's for a definitive period of time, I don't think it's as big of an issue, but if it's going to be open-ended, I think it's important.
It needs to run with the owner.
I've kind of heard, it just is in general, that if the property is appropriate for whatever use it's being applied for, then it's appropriate no matter who owns it. I thought there was legal precedence to that effect.
Well, I think it's
The board has, you can put reasonable conditions on these permits because of their nature, and one of those is the ownership.
Yeah. Our code has a little glitch in it, and it's a kind of interesting one. And it was my informal opinion before that when you grant one of these, unless there's a time limit, it is running with the land, the way our current code is written. And that is something that was addressed in the proposed amendments that were before the Planning Commission a number of years ago, in which Michelle and I commented on, and that was our comment. Under our code right now, these things run with the land. Now, under the Virginia law, you can make it owner specific, and there are a lot of jurisdictions who do it that way. But the answer, I think, before this board and before our planning commission historically has been to place a time limit on it. Otherwise, it is going to be an aspect of property ownership for that parcel. And now I can give you, a more structured opinion about it, but I think Michelle and I looked at that along with the previous zoning administrator, Mr. Dameron, and we all were of one accord, and that was because of that one code section. And I can't cite chapter and verse, but I can find it rather easily. I think it's like 155-14 or something like that. I won't say for sure, but I can give you a definitive opinion if you want.
Well, then maybe it sounds like everybody would be happy if we approved it for 5 years with the current ownership. And I'll make a motion that we do that. Approve this for 5 years under the current ownership.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
you have review.
No review, just 5 years under the current ownership.
And that's with all the stipulations that were requested.
Yeah, as presented. Yeah.
70 in your packet, the document called proposed condition includes, it's on the screen, includes the original conditions and then the revised request for this second application, as it were.
I have a motion and I have a second. Do I have any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Public hearing on
Good luck.
Thank you.
Hope you have more events than you have had.
We miss you guys, but 3 years is a much.
We'll see you in 5 years.
Okay.
Bye. See you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is a public hearing for your amended FY19 budget. This amendment is required because of Code of Virginia Section 15.2.2507, which requires you to hold a public hearing if your supplemental appropriations exceed 1% of your adopted budget, which leading up to this meeting, you had approached that limit but not exceeded it. The additional appropriations needed and listed in the table on the screen and in the packet put you over that limit by a significant amount. Most of this is due to school system supplemental appropriation, which is revenue neutral, budget neutral, includes commit to be fit dollars, federal dollars, state dollars that are carried forward from last year, and then commit to be fit grant. In addition, there are several appropriations that for items that were originally contemplated to be purchased in FY18, but for various reasons were put off until FY19. Either they didn't come in on time, or for the case of the public safety radios, which are half paid by grant, we purposely delayed them to be closer to when the radio system is implemented, and that uses 50% state grant money and then 50% of your fund balance, as it was planned to do in FY18 as well. There's a detailed budget included in the packet in the same format as the budget that you adopted. the exception of the Social Services Fund and Children's Services Act Fund. As I've discussed in previous meetings, the budget now breaks those out to be fully intended funds and shows very clearly the amount of local dollars needed to match state and federal dollars for those funds. There are no changes in the amount of funding for those two in this amended budget, only how they're presented. Unless the board has any questions, you can now move to the public.
Any questions? Public hearing for the fiscal year 19 budget. Anyone wishing to stand to speak will have the opportunity to do so. Simply raise your hand when recognized. State your name, the district that you're from, and direct your comments to the board. Public hearing is now open. Anyone care to speak?
I'm sorry to be dense, but is this regarding the budget you're asking?
This is regarding the budget and not Benvenue.
Thank you. She's eager. Patient.
But you can speak now if you think we need to spend any money on the thing.
No. Thank you.
Anyone care to speak? Anyone care to speak? No? So public hearing closed. One more item, another public hearing.
Well, we have some action items on this here.
Oh.
In order to amend this budget, there is a resolution in the packet for amendment of the budget. And then subsequent to that, there's a resolution in the packet to appropriate those newly budgeted funds. So two separate resolutions, two separate actions. And if you recall, when you adopted the budget on May 7th, you had these same two documents in addition to setting the tax rates. So
To move forward, I'll make a motion that we adopt the resolution to amend the fiscal year budget beginning July 1, 2018 and ending June 30, 2019. Any figures?
as included in the packet,
Yeah.
and totaling $26,747,311.
I'd second.
Does Mr. Parrish repeat his motion?
I can't remember that.
I'll hand the second one to you if you'd like.
Roll call. Mr. Frazier.
Aye.
Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Lozinski.
Aye.
Mr. Parrish.
Aye.
And I also.
All right, so as I just noted, you also have to appropriate those funds in order for them to be spent. So in the packet is a resolution appropriating funds for the amended fiscal year budget beginning July 1 and ending June 30, 2019 for Rappahannock County. Same dollar amounts. And this again is to appropriate the funds. And if someone moves what I just said.
I'll make a motion that we do what Mr. Curry just said.
And it worked so well the first time, I'll second it again.
Could I hear the amount once more?
26 million.
It's $26,747,311 without the interfund transfers, $37,639,388 before transfers. So that double counts some of the money. So you budget the dollars in the county budget, and then they go over to the school and you count them again to get to that 37. So it's not.
That's the way the government does stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't count.
It's confusing.
Any question, Mr. Curry, the building inspection number there, why did that change?
That is one of the two budgets that we bought a car for. So that was a $22,000 vehicle. that was thought to would arrive in June, but it came like the second week of July. So technically, it's an FY19 expense.
Try as we could, still, we tried to buy it, yeah, I forgot that.
Whenever it gets here is when it has to be accounted for. So this is also a roll call.
Roll call. We have a motion and a second. This is a roll call vote. Mr. Frazier.
Aye.
Mr. Lorenzo.
Aye.
Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Parrish.
Aye.
And I also. Anything else, Tim?
No, sir.
So we have one more public hearing. One more public hearing on Revenue Road, through truck restriction.
Yes, so as the board recalls, we discussed at the last meeting, the board directed me to advertise in the local paper to have a public hearing on whether Benvenue Road, Route 729, should be designated as a no-through truck route. The VDOT has a very prescriptive process to do this, and we just followed it for Water Street and Sons Lane. And earlier in the meeting, in the information section, VDOT sent us the letter saying that it was successful. Earlier this year, VDOT suggested that they didn't think it was appropriate, but ultimately it's the board's discretion to go through the public hearing process and formally request the commissioner of VDOT and his engineering team review the road. The actual restriction is shown on this map, and the requirements are that it be a reasonable alternative. So in this case, the direct route is 3.5 miles, and the alternate route is 5.3 miles, but the travel time is about the same according to Google Maps. And anybody who's driven that road knows that the travel time is about the same, perhaps even longer, to go on Benvenue Road if you're traveling at a safe speed.
Safe being the key word.
And so we know several people have not traveled at safe speed to their own peril. So that's compelling, and it'd be appropriate to hear from the public, which I think you will hear from during this public hearing. So that you can consider whether to adopt a resolution requesting formally the VDOT commissioner to designate this road.
Any comments from the board first?
Mr. Curry, you had said, maybe you covered this and I missed it, but I think you said at first, VDOT said that the county would have to fund this, but then now they're saying that that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, it was a little peculiar when I first reached out to VDOT just to see if they would support the idea. And our residency engineer said yes. Then he ran it up the flagpole to the district, and they said, well, you know, there are a lot of trucks on that road, and their opinion was people who, vehicles who drive by the sign that say no through trucks have the expectation that they won't see a truck. But there's local business traffic, so the fact of the matter is they may just see a truck. So they thought that that may be a safety issue. If somebody thought they wouldn't see a truck but then did see a truck, that would be bad. Now that's the case for any no-through truck designation, because you can always have local deliveries. They just made that opinion based on the number of local deliveries. At the same time, they suggested that if the county wanted to move forward anyway, the county could pay for the engineering study. We pushed back on that, and the citizens pushed back on that, and VDOT has said they will handle it the same exact way they did with Water Street and Sons Lane and handle the study themselves. Now, one could argue that we would want to do the study, but ultimately the code very clearly lays out that the district traffic engineer makes the recommendation to the commissioner. So if we did our own study, that engineer is still ultimately going to be making the determination.
Well, have you looked at the criteria that the road must meet to be designated no-through trucks?
Yes.
3 and 4.
I'm going to pull them up.
It's got to meet 1 and 2, and either 3 or 4.
Reasonable alternate route.
Right.
the character or frequency of truck traffic proposed for restriction is not compatible with the affected area.
Then I can make both of those. Can we meet 3 or 4?
Residential in nature, and it says typically, so agriculture, residential, and local or collect to local. I believe so.
At least 12 dwellings combined on both sides within 150 feet of the existing or proposed roadway center line for 1,000 feet of roadway.
For number 3,
What section of that road would
that number 3 may be a stretch. Number 4, I think, is correct.
I think 4 is correct.
It's either 3 or 4.
Right.
I know, but we've got this, in order to meet one of them, we've got to assume that we can meet 1 or 2.
I believe we can meet 1 and 2 and 4.
You think so?
Yeah.
Then I guess the public hearing is proper on the agenda.
And if VDOT doesn't think so, they can do so, they can let us know. We'll know unless we ask, right?
So, we ready?
Yeah.
This is the public comment section.
Public hearing for the Denver.
I skipped a few.
May I now?
Let me try to make my presentation here. I practiced this in front of me. This is a public hearing about the road 729, correct?
Yes.
And anyone wishing or caring to speak, simply raise your hand to be recognized. Once recognized, state your name and the district that you're from. State your comments and direct them directly to the board. I declare the comment section open. Anyone want to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Don't forget your sculpture. Sandra Renzi, Wakefield District. Mr. Chairman, I am here to thank you and the members of your board for requesting the study of Benvenue Road traffic by VDOT. I realize that there are a number of steps after this. The public hearing is only the first of those. Having lived on Benvenue for almost 12 years now, I can confidently say that it is the most dangerous road I know in Northern Virginia, where I've lived for 55 years. I'm older than that, but I've lived in Northern Virginia for 55 years. There are numerous places where, even at night with headlights, oncoming vehicles cannot be seen in advance. The winding, hilly, and shoulderless road means that many times it is necessary to stop completely when encountering the many through trucks, often very large in nature. Just a week ago, I was able to negotiate past a wide load of house framing only by pulling into Grimsley Road. Since there is no house being built on Benvenue, I assumed this truck with Ohio plates was using it as a cut-through. And I was surprised that a truck with a wide load sign could even go on Benvenue. You may not realize how often this road is used as a cut-through. I believe the traffic engineers will conclude that no through trucks, or better yet, through trucks prohibited signage, will improve the safety for all who must use Benvenue Road daily. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ann McLean, Wakefield District. I am an 11-year resident of Benvenue Road. And thank you for giving us a public hearing to begin the process of making Benvenue safer for everyone. We all know that Benvenue Road is both a very beautiful and a very dangerous road. In fact, I would say that it is so commonly known as a dangerous road that if any of us were to need to pull a trailer or drive a tractor that way, we would avoid it and definitely choose Route 522 and 211 over Benvenue for that particular trip. We know this, but I think you know that we are not the only ones who travel on this road. In fact, back in 2013, I couldn't find any more recent data, VDOT reported that 700 vehicles a day traveled Benvenue Road. Without local knowledge of the dangers of this road, many use Benvenue Road as a cut-through by following their GPS. Big trucks cannot maneuver the road easily, and worse, encountering trucks on this road is often very terrifying. These trucks have trouble making it around the tight turns, and on many occasions I've had to stop entirely in order to not to be decapitated by an oncoming truck, slowly trying to make it around the turn. We consistently find hubcaps and evidence of accidents and cars going into ditches on our side of Benvenue Road. We know of many accidents on the road and have experienced ourselves practically being driven off the road by oncoming trucks. Within the last year alone, cars have flipped over, T-boned, and even caught on fire. While we have seen police cars, ambulances, and fire trucks arrive, we do wonder why we cannot find data or reports of these accidents in the news, on the internet, or from the sheriff's office. Most truck drivers are safe drivers. Some have even stopped on the road and asked where they can turn around and go a different route. Sadly, once they have turned onto Benvenue Road, they are committed, and there is of course nowhere to turn around. We would actually be doing these drivers a favor by turning them away with a "Through Trucks Prohibited" sign at the entrance to our road. It is my position that this vote tonight is long overdue, and that you should definitely resolve to request this "Through Trucks Prohibited" signage. Our neighbor, Bob Mann, surveyed all the residents of our road, and we know of no one opposing this. There is no controversy here. It is a win-win situation. You win, we win, truckers win. It's actually a win-win-win. And I brought, I think I left it over there, but Mr. Mann, because of a family emergency, could not make it here tonight, and so he passed along the 20 people who said they couldn't make it tonight, who are Benvenue residents, who signed in support of the "Through Trucks Prohibited" sign.
For added emphasis, my name is Zeus, and I have been sent to ensure you do the right thing.
I'm so embarrassed.
What this is the remnant of a small automobile that was flipped, turned, and burned, and the aluminum engine on his little Japanese model left several pieces like this. That was all that was left. The road was damaged, tree burned down, and that's one that I personally didn't see, but I've seen at least 8 or 10 others very similar to this. Benvenue Road is just a horror. I can only tell you that when you have to stop at some of the curves, and that map just doesn't do justice to it, because it's a combination of changes in altitude, curve, combinations where you can't see what's coming. And those of us that live on the road, we kind of know where those are. And we slow down for them, or we get out of the way and avoid accidents. But it's the big vehicles that cause it. We had a guest not long ago who had a rear view mirror clipped from her vehicle. And the other driver stopped, she stopped, and they exchanged notes, and the agreement was, it happens all the time on this road. There's nothing you can do about it. Now, is that a way to run a railroad? I think to restrict those large vehicles that aren't bound for making deliveries on the road would be a simple solution. And with that, I'll take my Thunderbolt with me. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to thank the board too for listening to us about this matter. Appreciate it. Let's see. When Benvenue Road was, I'm Susie McNally. Of Wakefield, and I've lived on Benvenue for 30 years. About 300 years ago, when the road was built, initially, it was an Indian trail, and then because of commerce, the road was built, but it had to adhere to the contours of the land. And actually, it was the first turnpike in our area, so it's just steeped in incredible history. But my point is that the road was built 300 years ago. Never did those folks imagine 21st century traffic. And that's what we're stuck with, and it just doesn't work. And it's interesting. Benvenue Road has at least 3 historical designations. The Scenic Byway, it's on the National Register of Historic Places, and it's also the Benvenue Historic District. Now, I've talked to people about this, locals, and everybody, which surprised me, said, I am terrified of that road. I don't want to drive on that road. People who, even guys, said it scares them. So I'm saying, well, geez, that doesn't scan. This beautiful road that we want people to, be able to safely drive down is terrifying. So that doesn't make any sense to me. That's about what I have to say about it. And so I appreciate you listening. Thanks.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
Good evening. I'm Alexia Morrison. I live in Wakefield District, and I also live just off of Benvenue Road on Fog Mountain Lane. So that is, if you will, my road. I travel it whenever I leave my home. I don't want to add to the stories about nightmares on Benvenue Road, but what I'd like to point out are a couple of items that haven't been mentioned yet. Number one, Bob Mann, who was not able to be here tonight, tells an interesting story about seeing a trucker on the road, clearly challenged by the contours of the road. And actually, Bob was on the road at the same time, and the trucker went slowly and asked Bob, is there a way I can turn around? This trucker wanted to get off the road. So in a way, by designating this road as not for trucks, we would be doing some of the truckers a favor, because that designation would tell them this isn't the place you want to be, and it's pretty clear from history they don't want to be there, and they shouldn't want to be there. It's already been mentioned that there was a designation a couple of years ago. I don't know how closely this board followed that process, but we managed to get the state of Virginia to designate Benvenue Road as a rural historic district, the first one in this county. And being a rural historic district picks up on some of the things that Susie mentioned, which is it's gorgeous, we know that. It's tough because it started so long ago, not built for the purposes that we would think truckers would want to use it for today. And with that designation, it speaks to the fact that while it's gorgeous and historic, we're not going to change it. And so that road is narrow, it's not intended for trucks, it shouldn't be accessible by trucks. And with all of the stories about difficulties driving the road, the real point is, if there's going to be a problem on the road, if you have a truck involved in one of those, it's so much more serious than it will be if 2 cars come together on that road. when you see these really, really large vehicles having trouble on the road, that is a recipe for disaster for the people who live here, for the people who are driving cars on the road and get into trouble with the trucks. We're asking you to take this first step for us. VDOT will answer the legal questions, obviously, about whether the road fits the requirements of the statute, and their study is really the beginning of the process, and we hope that you'll support us in letting that process start and go forward from here. It doesn't cost us anything, so we're hoping that you'll say yes. Thank you.
Anyone else care to speak? Anyone else? Declare the public hearing closed. Any comments from the board?
Sounds like a no-brainer. Obviously, your district.
Half of it.
Half of it's mine.
Half of it.
I mean, if the board is of mind,
Y'all can't split it up like that.
Would that be a meeting? 3 of us.
We can't show up and look at it.
there is a resolution in the packet I placed on the screen if the board would like to move this along to VDOT.
If it's gonna be declared, closed to food trucks, it's gonna have some sort of grace period, it's gonna have to have proper signage, so we're gonna be looking at more signage.
Oh, right, and if you followed the process for Water Street and Sons Lane, we're holding a public hearing, and then VDOT will post a sign basically stating willingness to hold a public hearing and receive comments. So they'll post that sign on whether to post a different sign later. So this is it'll be several months.
Well, they'll do some studies.
And they'll do studies for, and we'll do our best to convince them how important it is.
Mr. Curry, where do we stand with, I know you were working on this, the GIS, working on that GIS issue. In other words, when you Google this.
Yeah, so I've reached out to most of the major trip routing services to put in a request that they alter their algorithm or whatever to make it not a cut through. And so just my informal tests indicate that Google Maps may be fixed. But there are many, many others. And so I've received feedback that they received my request, but no further feedback. And there are some, so Google Maps doesn't handle trucks. They don't have a truck routing software. Others, like TomTom, have dedicated truck routing software. They can designate it in their software as a no-through truck, but I think they would only do that if it were state designated.
Thank you. Well, I'll go ahead and make the motion for this board to request the Commissioner of the Virginia Department of Transportation to restrict through truck traffic on Route 729 Benvenue Road as declared in the resolution in our package.
I'll second it.
For purposes of what we discussed in the either or language on number 3 and 4, I wonder if it would be advisable to include the word local in the resolution.
Yeah.
So that it indicates to them that we've reviewed all of the points necessary. I recommend in the second whereas, we would say due to the location and geometry of this historic local road, and whereas a reasonable alternative route would, and take it from there.
Sounds good.
And then it makes the case, the complete case up front.
I mean, should in light of that, Ms. Smith raises a good point, should we also point out that this is a rural historic district?
Well, I intended in my letter of transmittal to hit all those parts. But
okay.
I don't think it would hurt to add it to the resolution either.
Nope.
I think the more weight you can put in there. I mean, it only means more writing for you. So,
All it needs is Mr. Lozinski and Mr. Parrish to recognize a friendly amendment to modify their motion in second, and I just need to know what words to write.
Yeah, I'll amend my motion to include that. I believe we can put this in the second whereas. As Ms. Smith, I think, noted, due to the, I'm sorry, you said local?
Location and geometry
The
of this.
geometry of this historic local road.
Which-
And then whereas, take it to the third whereas.
Or we can add on to that second whereas, which is, which is included in the Benvenue Rural Historic District.
Then I would make it just of this local road that is included in the Benvenue Historic District. Yeah.
I'll amend my motion to include that language.
And I'll still second that.
Motion made and second. Roll call vote. Mr. Parrish?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Lozinski?
Aye.
Mr. Frazier?
Aye.
And I also. I would like to comment one thing, there's no one here that's driven that road more than me. More than me. And it is a dangerous road, but there's another one in the county that will ride for it. Anything else, gentlemen? New business?
We're now on,
Oh, we have public comment. Next item is public comment. That means you can speak on any topic as opposed to an individual.
we're all looking over here.
No.
Anyone care to speak, just raise your hand. I'll recognize and state your name, district. Anybody else care to speak? About anything?
That you all go home early tonight.
We're missing a football game right now.
I'll declare public comment closed. New business, regional legislature platform.
There's just one item left on your agenda. Mr. Eldon James, who is our legislative liaison, and we provide a small fee to him in his group every year to help keep his eye on regionally with our partners on what's happening in the General Assembly. And each year he formulates a platform that by nature of its name is regional, so most items are of concern to us. Some are more of concern to our neighbors, such as revised SMART scale, which is the VDOT funding for primary roads. So
I'm sorry,
proffers is another big one. But there are some here that are very important to us, like broadband and Children's Services Act. Our budget this year is $1.6 million. These are key issues. And the thought is that when we speak regionally, we speak with a louder voice. And so by supporting our neighbors and them supporting us in these matters, we think we can carry a greater tone with our legislators. Unless there's anything in this platform that this board is opposed to, it would be good to support the regional platform. And leave that to consideration. If you do support it, a simple motion to that end, and then I will let Mr. James know by letter so he can put your endorsement behind it along with other boards of supervisors.
So I think it's a good idea to endorse this year, just by consensus.
I think a motion would be best.
So I'll make a motion that we support Mr. James's efforts.
Still second, Mr. Chairman.
Just a quick question, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Curry, this AOSS, Alternative On-Site Septic Systems, I think it's on the top of page 5. Is this?
That applies to us as well as other areas. The state basically took away local authority to influence the design, installation, or maintenance of engineered septic systems. And so these units are fantastic when they work well. But if they aren't maintained, they're worse than a conventional system. So either the VDH or the locality should have more authority to regulate and monitor the maintenance of those systems.
And that's what we're asking the General Assembly to...
Right. The region encourages the General Assembly to provide adequate authority to VDH or localities.
Once they're installed, it's like no monitoring.
Right. And you see this more in maybe like a Fauquier or something where people moved out of the city, they don't even know they have an on-site septic system or a conventional system, and you can't just forget it like a conventional system. You have to pay attention to these
Well,
things.
they came here one night, I forget how many years ago, made a presentation either to the board or to the planning commission, and they told us that 50% of all alternative systems were in Warren and Shenandoah counties. 50% statewide were in those two counties.
Statewide.
We saw a lot in our lower lying areas where they just wouldn't perk conventionally in Gloucester.
Well, I think it's rock up there.
We
Warren and Shenandoah.
we went in and put a local ordinance and had the state slap us back. So somebody better do it. And if the state's not going to do it, the county should be able to do it.
Well, I think the counties are closer to it. We probably know our soil better than they do.
So in all that, I think I missed was Mr. Parrish moved.
Yeah, to support Mr. James' efforts, say it.
Yeah, that's fine. Support the legislative platform.
Right.
And Ms. Frazier, second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Only one item left.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those in favor say aye.
Get home.
Years ago, I had a dog that would bite me if I came home after dark.
No.